Hello and welcome to the Gladiator Podcast, your place for Gladiator news and content. It's the Jumpstart Historic Horizons set review. I'm Joker Bodie, and here with me today we have...
UFO.
As well as...
I'm too intimidated to admit it, but I'm Seismic Lawns.
And also we have...
Hi, it's Blight. I don't have to immediately speak after Joker now, so it feels normal again.
That's correct. And also with us, because of course, every time we do a set review, we have with us our good friend...
Hello, yes, I've been trying to reach you about your car's extended warranty.
And of course, as those
also,
are
my name is
scams...
Effie. Hello.
Hey,
And
Effie,
of course,
something's up
as-
with my microphone.
God.
Something's up with it?
It's coming through pretty hot.
Oh, good. We're already starting
Tech
off
issues
with,
galore. What, you
starting
talking about
off
like
with
the
a bang.
levels?
Mm-hmm.
You sound fine. Like, are we talking about
Yeah.
like just the levels or actually like on the stream?
Yeah, on stream it looks like there's constant noise.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah,
actually...
It's not actually that loud. Everything is fine.
Yeah.
It just means that you've got a special personality here today, UFO.
Me-
And just
being
like
insecure
we have
about my
special
microphone levels?
personality, and just like we have special personalities, we have our first card, Barb Spike.
Wow, we're jumping into this fast, huh?
We're really going in.
We have so many cards to talk about. We need to.
But Joker,
So
what
Barb
is
Spike-
the set? What is the set? What does it do? Where does it come from?
We already said Jumpstart Historic Horizons. Fine, you know what? All right, Jumpstart Historic Horizons. To talk about this first, Jumpstart Historic Horizons is a special set coming to Magic's Gathering Arena. It is including cards from Modern Horizons 1, Modern Horizons 2, and some random places in the depths of Magic, because we've got some really weird ones. We're not talking about some of those today, but they do exist, and you will see them show up from the set. And then also, we have some new 2 arena cards in the form of some very silly cards that we'll be getting to very soon, and with some new mechanics that we'll talk about as we get to them. But for now, to start off this set review, the first card that we are talking about is Barbed Spike.
Before we get into like what Barbed Spike is, it's also worth noting that this set for like collecting outside of wildcard crafting needs to be done through an event that's going to be happening through a little bit of Midnight Hunt's release. That is either 2,000 gold to enter or 400 gems to enter. And that'll get you somewhere
Two
between 4 and 6 rares out of these sets, which is the tasty, tasty stuff that we love to see. It'll also get you some other cards, and a deck, in fact, to play for 2 or more games. One of those uncommons that you could get is Barbed Spike, which is 1 and white for an artifact equipment, and when it enters the battlefield, it creates a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying, and then attaches Barbed Spike to it. The equipped creature gets +1/+0, and it equips for 2 mana. So, I have been a long proponent of artifacts in every set, every sense, whether that be in an aggro sense, which is where I really want to see it more, or in a generic value sense, or in a combo sense, especially with Paradox Engine in the format. Barbed Spike, along with a lot of the other cheaper artifact creatures, it's not literally an artifact creature, but it does play as an artifact creature and makes one, really make me want to see an artifact aggro deck be more prevalent now, and we got a lot of support to make that happen. Barbed Spike is a 2/1 flyer for 2 that also has the artifact synergies, and then makes a artifact that's slightly worse than Bone Splitter after it. Actually, much worse than Bone Splitter after it dies, but that is still free value.
Yeah. Hey, Seismic, you ever heard of Welkin Turn?
I have. It's a great card. Unironically.
Yeah, and this is Welkin Turn plus... Which,
Welkin Turn plus a pretty Despite being worse than Bone Splitter on 2 levels, it's still pretty good.
It's a bad equipment. It's a very, okay, this card is good because it's a 2-mana 2/1, and that it has a way to gain value later, but as an equipment on its own, this card is not good, and I feel that is worth saying. But
Yeah, the point of it is that it has the body up front.
Yeah.
But honestly,
one of a creature with extra value.
One of the parts I'm really excited about when it comes to this card is in the white artifact decks. We recently got a card called Oswald Fiddlebender, and importantly, 3 is a very important number to hit when it comes to artifact decks, and being able to say, play this, keep the Thopter, and turn the Spike into a Chief of the Foundry, or, whatever you feel you need at the moment in your 3-drop
why
slot.
Chief of the Foundry? Maul the Skyclaves, my dude.
I mean, that works too. Yeah, sure. Turn your equipment into a better equipment, but it's just this is the kind of stuff that deck needs. Is just this is the card that fills in a very important role player in being a 2-mana 2/1 flyer artifact creature, but also there's additional value when we look at some of the deeper synergies, and I think that's what's going to make it actually relevant.
Yeah, and this is by far not the only cool new artifact creature to come out of this set, and there's a lot of them that are coming in really a small density of these packets that all do a ton of work to make artifact creatures more relevant, or just are really good artifact creatures on their own.
Yeah, if I can take a quick moment, just the way that the packets are set up for the purposes of collecting the cards in the event, it's no more gold or gems compared to buying just packs in general. And each packet that you open doesn't just have the 2 rares that are on theme for the packet. It also has a bunch of commons and uncommons that work within that theme. Jumpstart is one of the best ways to kickstart a Gladiator collection for the purposes of building decks for the format, because you are very much going on theme with these cards. You'll open up the artifact cards and you're like, oh, I now have 20 new cards that I can throw into my artifact deck in Gladiator.
I think that's especially true for the for this instance of Jumpstart, because it turns out the commons and uncommons from the past 2 Modern Horizon sets are really good, and they did not pull their punches.
I would say over 50% of the cards we're talking about today are commons and uncommons.
Yeah, definitely, versus, say, the last set where we spent most of the time talking about rares and mythics. To be honest, we spent a lot of time in AFR talking about rares and mythics, with I think 1 or 2 exceptions. So this is definitely a change of pace on that front.
Indeed.
Like our next card, a common, Leonin Sanctifier, a 2-mana 2/1. Second time we've had a 2-mana 2/1. Perfect. But this one is a cat cleric with lifelink. Then it also says, this is a new mechanic, friends. When Leonin Sanctifier enters the battlefield, choose a creature card in your hand. It perpetually gains lifelink. Okay, perpetually. Perpetually does not stop between zones. Any
you
zones.
Can't remove it.
Yeah.
Once you give the card lifelink, it has lifelink. Talk to me about it in Historic later. There's some fun stuff.
This would be the equivalent of taking the card in paper and writing on it in Sharpie.
Yeah, pretty much. There's a cycle of these cards. We'll talk about the rest once we get to their respective colors. This one is fine. There are games where you want to play a 2-mana 2/1 lifelink, and it's just good, I just got to punch them in the face with the lifelinker, or this got to block their 3/2. And it gained me 2 life. Great. Amazing. This one also has the extra bonus of giving some really high impact cards lifelink. I'm just imagining playing this in green-white and being able to give some of the 2-mana 3/3s in that deck lifelink. Giving, say, Garrett... Is it...
Garrick's Harbinger?
Garrick's Harbinger. Giving that lifelink. This 3-mana 4/3 also has lifelink now.
Yeah,
I
there are just so many like impactful threes you can play after this that like at 3 or 4 power, giving them lifelink, and then also this just being a 2-power lifelink creature is gonna be real good.
I don't even know if
And-
you need a 3-drop for this. I'm just imagining like pretty much any a Johnny's Pridemate style card getting lifelink that like doesn't already have it, and it just shoots up in value. Like imagine getting like a Trellisara with lifelink so that when it deals damage you also scry, and just it constantly is getting bigger no matter what the opponent does.
Is there a card that does damage to you?
There's plenty of cards that do damage to you, but I don't know how many there are in Arena.
Like giving Yawgmoth new card coming lifelink doesn't negate
I think
It doesn't
Yawgmoth
work.
is lose
There's
life.
loss
Pay
of
Or
life, yeah.
no, sorry, you pay
You
the
pay.
life. So,
But
Technically,
There-
this does work with Demon Lord Belzenlock, but I'm not
It's
gonna
2
say
mana.
you should play
It's
this
2
in your
mana.
Belzenlock deck because
Yeah,
it
it's
doesn't
2
cost
mana.
4 or more.
yeah,
I will say,
that,
I look forward to getting to like put lifelink on a Glorybringer.
oh, oh,
there's
that's
also the forbidden card.
Well,
the
yeah,
forbidden card.
Yeah, that's just
Oh.
a really good thing to give.
I can't go
Hellrider
out saying it
exists.
just yet. Yeah, Hellrider is amazing for that.
Oh,
yeah, there are
that's-
so
that's-
many options here.
Hazaret would love lifelink.
Discard a card, lightning helix you, one less on each side, but still.
Even just
I
like
also
putting it on a Midnight Reaper, so you're just at free card draw.
Ooh.
There it is. Midnight
Yeah.
Reaper's the one.
Yeah.
Midnight Reaper's the
Yeah,
one.
I
Okay.
also just I think that Magic isn't really designed for random creatures to have lifelink.
And yeah.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
that just
Ferocidon.
kind of
Ferocidon.
Um,
it
no,
prevents life gain.
Ferocidon.
itself.
Prevents life gain, thankfully.
I'm
yeah,
going
also-
to go into the Shadow Realm where I belong. I will see you all in like 3 weeks.
Speaking of what Seismic mentioned, though, there's an important little thing to keep track of with this set. We're not talking about too many others, but you mentioned our good friend Johnny's Pridemate. There's a lot of cats that are sneaking in this. This is a very good cat. Giving your Kiora lifelink, giving your Pride Malkin lifelink, giving Cats was mildly real before. This set is kind of pushing it forward and just getting more good 2-drops. The less blank 3/1s you have to play, the better in that deck. And this is a card that's really good at just taking over a game sometimes. But our next card is also really good at taking over the game. Ranger Captain of Eos. 1 white for a 3/3. Human soldier, also now is a ranger.
Really?
Really?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
Huh.
Makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it
Just
says,
didn't realize it.
when Ranger Captain of Eos enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a creature card with converted mana cost 1 or less, and reveal it. Put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Then, it also has this spicy line of text. Sacrifice Ranger Captain of Eos. Your opponent can't cast non-creature spells this turn. This card is so good!
Yeah.
There's already been times where Ranger of Eos has been playable. The
4 mana
4 mana 3/2 that also gets you 2 instead of 1. This one getting you only 1, I mean, boo-hoo. It's a 3/3 instead of a 3/2, and then it also has that insane mode where it gets to make sure that they can't cast the Settle, make sure that they can't cast a Planeswalker or a Wrath, if you know that's the only way they have to get out of the board versus a non-block control deck. But this card gets a lot of important cards. Most importantly, it gets something like Giant Slayer, which is a removal spell, or Giant Killer, the 1 mana 1/2 that has Chop Down on the second mode. Also, Effie, don't spread lies. There's a goblin in this list.
Yes.
Yeah,
we have a
goblin
Seismic
in
was
there.
We
saying
have a whole
plural.
one. Yeah,
We
sorry.
shouldn't spoil
Plural
the
is
goblins
wrong.
in this list.
We have un goblin. But anyway,
But
Ranger Captain
this-
of Eos is insane.
Yes.
Yeah, Ranger
Um,
Captain is just, it's so good. So
I think
good.
the most common Ranger Captain target, I think, is going to continue to be Giant Killer, the most common Ranger of Eos target.
Yeah. Giant Killer,
Giant Killer's
Stone Coil
really
Serpent's up
good,
there.
but yeah. We
Yeah,
have a
'cause,
lot
like-
of really good X targets.
Yep.
That
I also
good
see
targets.
people
kill.
starting to play. I mean, Hope of Garapor is a weird card, and I guess Ranger Captain also does this. But
better, yeah.
like, if you have a Luris with Hope of Garapor, you just stop them from casting non-creature spells.
I
Yeah,
mean, yeah, that's a cool loop.
Notably,
that's weird.
Notably,
Kinda
Ranger
works.
of Captain of Eos has, that second ability that I literally have never read before today. I don't know how I
Yeah.
kept missing it. I just kind of, I guess, go into a fugue state after reading that first paragraph. And this card not only is really good for, just getting a creature, but it's also really good at making sure that your opponent can't cast a Wrath on a pivotal turn, or can't cast a counterspell on a combo turn if you're in a somewhat white heavy combo deck.
You know, also would be great for Ranger Captain.
Yeah,
Having it
listen.
in play and sacrificing it in response to your opponent putting a Emergent Ultimatum on the stack.
Yeah, that,
Oh,
Oh, no.
like we just wins in the game. Yeah, because even the best piles, the only creature they're gonna put in that stack is Vorinclex usually, and you can just throw that back.
Yeah. But notably, if you do say, can't cast non-creature spells, they do just at that point choose their 3 best creatures.
Sure.
Or they should. Which is still
You
good,
assume they're
but
gonna have
not...
creatures to put in there.
Yeah, if someone does this when I emergent in 4-color planeswalkers, I am kind of at a loss because I'm okay, Vorinclex is good. That's kind of it.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can actually a Paradise Druid and maybe some 3-drop.
Yeah, no, I'm just imagining it's okay, we sacrifice this in response to Urgent Ultimatum. The stack is Vorinclex, Uro, Wall of Blossoms.
Can't Uro.
Can't even
Right.
Uro.
Yeah, Vorinclex, Wall of Blossoms, Overgrown Battlement. Good
Yeah,
pile.
something like that.
Basically,
Good pile.
Anyway,
yeah.
the real answer is you don't cast Emergent Ultimatum into this card. Just
Well, yeah.
we're doing the Death and Taxes thing of fantasizing about situations that will never happen.
It's
But
fine.
what if we collected company into it?
What?
I don't play collected company.
All right, no, I'm listening. We may actually have enough for a mildly okay Coco deck, but later.
Yeah, but you could just
Later.
play
Later.
a creature instead of Coco. Anyways,
Eh.
next card.
Yes. So the next card we're talking about is the first of the Planeswalker cycle that is coming in Jumpstart Historic Horizons. Teo Aegis Adept. And we see a few new keywords in this card here. It is 2 and 2 white for a 4 loyalty Teo legendary Planeswalker, with a +1 that says up to 1 target creature's base power perpetually becomes equal to its toughness. It perpetually gains this creature can attack as though it didn't have a defender.
Such a pushed card. What the hell?
I mean, it's
Not that crazy.
No, it's such a pushed defenders matters card in terms of if we look at the defenders matter cards that exist, this one just lol. But
Yeah,
the rest of the
and then-
card, as you were saying, sorry.
The -2 is conjure a Lumbering Light Shield card onto the battlefield. Lumbering Light Shield is actually a new additional arena exclusive card that is 2 mana for a 1/4 defender I think.
Yes.
No
Wall,
defender.
I think.
No, not
No
defender. Not defender.
I
Just the
think
2 mana 1/4.
type- I don't remember its type. It might be, like,
Elemental.
spirit elemental.
It's an
Okay.
illusion.
Sorry, right.
Man,
It was
we are
it was
bad at this.
importantly
We should
not
have
an
added
elemental.
this card to the Scryfall
Should've.
list. But
We
it's fine.
should've.
That's my fault. Yes.
It's an illusion.
When it enters the battlefield, though, a target opponent reveals a non-land card at random from their hand. That card perpetually gains. This card costs 1 more. They only reveal 1 card at random, and they don't get to choose. Which means there's a situation when you put a Lumbering Light Shield into play that an opponent reveals nothing, and you get to know that their hand's entirely land.
Yep.
Oh, right. It specifies non-land card.
Yep.
Thank you, Effie, for sneaking Lumbering White Shield onto the card reader for us. So nice for us.
It also just like randomly lets you know what cards are in their hand,
Just
Yeah.
1.
Yeah.
which is just
Having
good.
a white
Yep.
pseudo, like, white does
Wait,
not
no,
get
no,
that information, really.
Well, there's 1 card that does it. And I really
Reveals.
like it.
Okay, reveals. Never mind. I was like, I remember that this didn't give you the whole hand, but I couldn't remember if the reveal was. There's some weird perpetual cards, so I had to make sure. Importantly, this one says conjure onto the battlefield, which some of the cards that have conjure don't, and that's like, this card can minus to make a 1/4 blocker that makes whatever good card they have in hand harder to cast,
I mean, maybe.
depending on, right? Like,
Yeah.
obviously there's times where it's like, all right, your bolt became a lightning strike.
Tato does
GGs.
have other text though.
Yes, the ultimate.
I haven't read this before. So you get -6. You get an emblem with at the beginning of your end step, return target white creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. You gain life equal to its toughness. That's a weird ultimate on a mono white planeswalker, but I'm here for
Yes.
it.
Oh, this is an important time to mention the important part of conjure.
Mentor?
Mention.
Mention.
Okay,
Mentor
so
the
we put.
important part of conscience.
Okay,
Venture into
we are
the
going
dungeon.
to mention the important part of conjure. Conjure creates a card. It is not a token. It is a card.
Yep.
It is a piece of cardboard in your digital game until that game ends. So if they say remove the Lumbering White Shield that you put in with the minus, and then you later get to Ultimate Teo, when you look for targets, you'll have that Lumbering White Shield there if you want.
Indeed.
Also, the fact that this ultimate's 2 turns after you play it is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a surprisingly like quick ultimate, and I think a lot of people will be potentially down on this +1 for like being too focused on only defenders matter and things like that. However, notably, this can be used on your opponent's creature. And
Man, that 3-1 starts looking real bad.
yeah, and it's a
Oh.
permanent effect. So you know,
There is.
if your opponent is throwing down a really aggressive deck, Teo usually will change a creature's power down by 1 to 3 on like its first plus.
This really makes people trying to play like Seasoned Hollowblade look a little silly, huh? Nice 2 mana 1/1.
Hmm. Yeah.
Still a good
I mean,
card.
it
Great
also
blocker.
Yeah, it does just also make stuff like Redan hit a bit harder. Like, you don't need
yeah.
it to be a huge buff for it to just do a bit more work for you.
Oh yeah, like Redain, Shalai.
And you also have the timing of the light shield working really well with the +1, where you can come in -2, then +1 to make it a 4/4.
Yeah.
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 These Teo's abilities work really well together, and I think that might be the biggest reason it would see play in like a more controlling mid-range deck in white. Just because, you know, that Lumbering Light Shield is a surprisingly good card, and being able to, like, in most games, just say, you know, this Teo can just be 2 Lumbering Light Shields and I'm okay with that. make
Yeah,
your
they're gonna be.
opponent.
There are gonna be
And-
games where that's just like the operating mode. And I'm just like, good, I have information.
Yeah, and notably, Light Shield doesn't affect the mana cost. It just says this spell costs 1 more. So if you have your opponent who's trying to cheat out on mana by casting things for free or anything of that sort, it's going to be, permanent taxing on that game plan. Teo just does a lot of different, surprisingly good things for a 4-mana planeswalker.
Thinking about it, right? What's it? The new invitational card. I can't remember the name of it for some reason.
Elite Spellbinder.
Elite Spellbinder. That Elite Spellbinder with a slight tweak could be in this suite of cards. Instead of exiling it, just give it perpetually.
Sure, yeah.
And I think it also, Elite Spellbinder points to the difficulty of trying to port that type of idea to a paper format, like outside of Arena, because that is the way to mark a card to be more mana in the rules of regular Magic.
Yeah. It's interesting seeing them sort of take the idea and adapt it in a different way. For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of taking ideas and adapting them,
changing them a bit. Yeah, Vesperlark is our next card. 2 and a white for a 2/1 elemental with flying. And when Vesperlark leaves the battlefield, return target creature with power 1 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield with evoke for 1 and a white. This card is really cool. It can bring back some little things. Maybe you've got, I don't know,
One
a
ring
ward
Light
in
Shield.
your graveyard, or a light shield in your graveyard. Yeah, that would work. But what I'm really looking at this card for is a potential combo with a different arena-exclusive card that is coming out. Davriel's Withering. 1 and a black for target creature perpetually gets -1/-2. If you target Vesperlark with this card, you have now entered yourself into a situation where Vesperlark will consistently and constantly die and then return itself, gaining as many death triggers as you could want and as many enter the battlefield triggers as you could wish. And then you better have some way to stop it, because I don't think it's a May.
If you have another, it is not a May, so
Nope.
it does just go infinite if you don't. Yeah,
Have a
you
way
do
to
just
interact.
lock yourself out of the game if you don't have another thing to target.
It is
I
a
would also-
good way to draw the game if
Yeah,
Yep.
if you
Good.
want to do that as well.
quotation marks. Not
Yeah,
no,
good.
Don't. Also, side note with this, it does say leaves the battlefield, so it's very good with effects like Ephemerate.
I mean,
If you're trying to do
Can
more
I just
fair
jump in real
things.
quick on that one?
Sure.
I imagine when you initiate that loop, you're doing it because you have a way to kill your opponent. Like you have a aristocrats effect.
A
Typically.
corpse knight, or
should-
a vindictive vampire. No, not vindictive.
Which should, in
What's the-
theory, kill your opponent before you have a game of Magic that lasts longer than the sun.
well, this would be, in paper Magic, this would be demonstrating a loop and the game would end in a draw. In online Magic on Arena, I think loop protection makes you lose the game?
I believe
No,
so.
loop protection ends a draw.
Okay. Also,
Yeah.
there's a draw.
Arena can handle draws pretty well. It sometimes likes to create a instance of like this game should be a draw where there isn't technically a draw, but if you have a way to kill your opponent, it won't really say, "Oh,
If you're
this is
losing-
a draw."
The difficulty with that, Telmachos, is if you are losing, you can draw the game. if and only if you don't have other creatures in your graveyard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe you can trigger loop protection if you do, because you just continue choosing the Vesper Lark and then it happens. But I believe because you have other choices, it punishes you differently.
Yeah,
I don't remember exactly how that works.
At that point, when you start taking repetitive game actions, we have other game actions available. That's when it starts roping you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because then you actually can finish it. But the other bit is gonna be a case of it will continue ad infinitum until the game draws. Yes.
Yeah.
I do want to bring up that Vesper Lark doesn't necessarily need a combo shell in order to really shine. We have a lot of powerful 1-power creatures throughout Magic's history, and a decent amount of them are in Arena. And some really interesting ones include things like Toski, Bearer of Secrets, the one that makes all your things draw cards. Or there's a lot of kind of Pyromancer-esque effects. That we have an actual Pyromancer and Murmuring Mystic, but we also have things like Mad Ratter.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're
can get back
going deep
Alrund
today.
with this,
Yeah. Oh,
which
wait.
isn't actually that deep. Honestly, I really like Alrund.
Oh, also this
actually-
can get back Polyk.
Yeah,
Oh.
it gets back Polyk.
I think does Pelucranos escape or leave the graveyard with 12 counters?
I believe it's specifically escaping.
I think
unfortunately.
they made it escape. I think they made it escape because I think it came up with the
Nethroi.
ZNR Nissa.
Oh, yeah, also Xionar Nessa, but also Nethroi.
Yeah, that
Right.
sounds right. That says escape, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's also other cards that will set power perpetually. There's a white card that we didn't talk about in the white set, but perpetually makes a creature's power 0. I don't know what you would be looping with that, but
Maybe there's
an option
something
there.
Kill us! Find the way and kill us! I believe in you.
Oh, you get back Fiend Artisan and stuff. Yeah, no, there's a lot you can do with this.
Yeah, you get a lot of options with this card, even if you're not trying to just like absolutely murder your opponent in one combo turn. You can get a good amount of value with this if you are cognizant of what other targets your deck might have as you're building with it.
Yeah.
Vesper Lark also makes me more excited to try like an Abzan combo Kratz build. Also, I found the loop. We cast that 0 power spell on Renegade Rallier. If you have a sack outlet, that's a loop.
Ah, yeah. There's a few like that. That's cool. That's cool stuff.
No, it's not because Vesper Lark is 3 CMC. Don't mind me. Because CMC not powered.
You can also just have
Almost.
it target itself if you have a sack outlet.
Yeah, that still works. Point being is I'm still gonna try this out in like a Abzan combo Kratz sort of style because all the cards are reasonable there except maybe Davriel's Withering, but like we've got a lot of.
Withering is fine.
It's not still not bad. It's still not bad.
It's
Yeah.
like a disfigure. It's
Yeah.
playable. It's
Yeah.
not something that I would slot into just any deck. It's
Sure, yeah.
mainly in decks that are playing Vesper Lark, but
We've been playing Deadweight and
isn't the
Disfigure
worst.
as like a thing that some people need to play.
I think it'll
honestly
definitely show
think-
up in I think it'll still show up in like controlling lists as well, the Withering, because this targets Scrap Heap Scrounger.
Yeah,
This targets Rekindling Phoenix. Makes it a 3/1.
Red Wanderer.
Dread Wanderer, Gutter Bones, what's another
Flame
one?
Skull.
Our Flame
Phoenix
Skull.
of Ash. Phoenix of Ash.
Phoenix
is
of
a-
Ash.
I think
Phoenix of Ash
outside
comes
of
back
the
and lives, but it's
Yeah.
still
Lightning
substantially
Phoenix.
smaller.
So even outside of those, like Disfigure's worst problem is that once you get into the state of the game where players aren't playing impactful X2s, Disfigure is terrible. Like, it's pretty actively not good, and if it is in a relevant situation, it's very niche, and it's still mostly a dead card. Davriel's Weathering, I think, is just a lot better if it's always going to be a thing and always at instant speed.
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
Speaking of niche cards that are going to be hard to play,
But
the next
people
card is
still
Archmage's
play
Charm.
anyway.
3 blue.
Oh, right. This is the thing I'm supposed to read, isn't it?
Yeah, I was like,
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah, Archmage's Charm is blue, blue, blue for an instant with 3 modes. Choose one. Counter target spell. Target player draws 2 cards. Or gain control of target non-land permanent with converted mana cost 1 or less. I guess it's mana value now. I was just reading it off the Modern Horizons art. Yeah. So this card is pretty alright.
pretty
All
expensive.
of these modes are good. All of these modes you will pay 3 mana for. Like the last one's definitely very niche, but it's got some interesting utility. It lets you like turn one of your opponent's aggro creatures against another one. The pips are definitely a big thing, and like you can't just slide this into Jeskai control without paying the price for it very often. But I think the card is good enough that a lot of 2-color lists, I'm thinking stuff like blue-red, and then like the blue-green turns deck that I was playing for a while, that I dropped off of due to not really having as much time to play Magic. But like that deck loves this. This card just does a lot of stuff.
On the subject of that 3rd mode, Blight.
Yes.
You know the 2 cards that Control has a pretty decent, pretty hard time finding a little bit of an answer to? Shark Typhoon Cycle and Commence the Endgame.
Oh yeah. This
Both
takes
of which
tokens.
Archmage's Charm can steal.
So, what I'm learning today is that I just didn't read any Modern Horizons cards. I
mean, to be fair, you could just assume that they were busted. That was the
yeah.
set.
Back when I was first reading Archmage's Charm, I thought that last mode had 2 extra things. I thought it was only an artifact, not a permanent, and I didn't realize in any capacity that it could grab tokens. And yeah, right now we play good tokens, and a lot of decks do. And so I think Archmage's Charm, yeah, it's real good. However,
I'm gonna finally get to punish you for that Merit Lage's Slumber.
oh yeah, you absolutely are.
Target Stone Coil Serpent.
Yeah.
Ooh.
It's
Notably,
monocolored.
triple blue is hard to do, but it's not impossible. And although slower mana is good and like does get a lot of really weird mana requirements, triple blue is, I think, still a very tough to naturally get mana requirement. And it's not going to happen. There's going to be times where you're like, wow, I really wish I could cast this, but because I'm playing a utility land, I can't. Or because I'm decided to play this in a 2-color deck, I can't play this. And you'll rue those days, but the days where you can cast it, it'll feel very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a solid card. It has that instant speed draw, which is 3 mana and nice, but technically I would count this as like a 4 to 5 CMC spell when it comes to timing. So it's not much different than the other instant speed draw 2s we have available to us. Like it does 3 different things decently well. Each one thing isn't like stand out amazing, but they all kind of work together pretty well.
Yeah, and I don't know if blue got enough new toys with this set to make like mono blue control a really much more valuable than it was previously. But if there's ever been a reason to be mono blue control, Archmage's Charm is it.
I think we could definitely hit the point with this card and some of the other cards that we saw for like a blue with a light splash of say green, and sort of go for like, I'm going to say this, like a mono blue Wilderness Reclamation style of deck where it's like you're just focused on being as focused on controlling the game as possible. And you know, it's like we have a bunch of instant speed win cons. We talked about Shark Typhoon, we talked about Commence Endgame, we talked about Archmage's Charm. Like they're like, we have the cards now, we have a lot of density of effects where like we could maybe see that kind of deck exist. And I'm not going to say that's going to be top tier or even good, but I think that there's definitely room to explore that style of list thanks to the power level of the cards that we would be splashing in green.
Joker
Boney?
Boney?
Another deck that lets me splash Wilderness Reclamation, I'll take it.
Joker Boney, you have to be... You have to be careful with what you say, Joker Boney, because you might just put Blight into a value-induced coma.
Yeah. Having more divinations is always useful for those blue decks, especially ones that are more playable than regular divination.
There's
Speaking
another...
of...
Yeah.
Lightning, you have another card you want to talk about.
Yeah, so the next card is Bounty of the Deep. This one is 2 generic and a blue mana for a sorcery. And I believe this mechanic is it's the first time we're seeing this. If you have no land cards in hand, seek a land card and a non-land card. Otherwise, seek 2 non-land cards. So seek is a weird mix of revealing from the top until you find a card with X property and then just drawing it. I guess the idea is that it's going to give you a random card with the property it says. So if you don't have any lands in hand, this is going to give you a random land from your deck and a random non-land. Without
importantly,
you having
this like
to go through your deck, which is why it's an arena-only mechanic.
Yeah, you don't go through your deck. You don't change the position of any cards that you do know in the deck. So, for example, if you've scryed cards to the bottom or to the top, those will stay where they are. It's just going to grab a random card of the property listed.
On this particular card, you don't need to reveal your hand to not have lands in it. You don't need to reveal that you got the land card, and you don't need to reveal that you got non-land cards. Your opponent gets absolutely no information on whether or not you had or did not have lands in hand when you cast this spell.
No land grants here.
The only way that they could get information off of this is if you somehow get one card off of this, which usually means your library is small enough that a lot of things don't matter.
Woo!
Yeah.
Would that be one non-land?
Yes, because you would have no land cards in hand and no land cards in deck, so you just grab a non-land card.
Yeah, we don't currently have a Charbelcher, so it doesn't quite get use out of that, but that seems fun.
if this is your last card in hand, they do get to know that you have like one of the cards in your hand is a land, but there's a lot of powerful lands in the format that's like, oh no. Oh no, they drew I can't think of oh no, they drew a Castle Vantress. Oh no, Faceless Haven. Oh no, insert creature land here. But like, there's enough impactful land that it's like they could still have double threat off of this Bounty of the Deep, depending on what kind of list is playing it.
So Dan Kids ask, what happens if you scry your only seek target for a seek card to the bottom of your library or know its location? The answer is it still goes to your hand.
Yeah. Like, okay, so to add that to like what I said about cards not changing position, like you can still get a card that you have scryed to the bottom. It's just none of the cards that you don't pick are gonna change position. Other than like if you scry 3 cards to the bottom and you get the card that's in the middle of those 3, technically the one that was the third card is one closer to the bottom, but
Notably, also, using the Seek mechanic does reset your Scry reveal.
Yeah, so you know that
even
you
in
will,
R format.
yeah, you can know that the information is there, but Arena will say, I don't know what you know anymore.
Right.
And
Is that how that works? Is that
yeah.
confirmed? Huh.
Yes.
Yes, that was confirmed on Twitter.
Weird.
Because the purpose of it in four of formats, right?
Right.
You can know that the top card of your library is, I don't know, a Llanowar Elves, and you seek an elf. You have other Llanowar Elves in your deck. You get a Llanowar Elf. You no longer know if the top card of your library is a Llanowar Elf.
I guess. Okay. And because even though we're a singleton format, okay, all right, I get you. So now it's valuable to play different copies of cards so that you know. All right, I'm in. I'm into this. I like this.
Also because of that fact, they're just resetting Scry every time you seek, even if you don't find anything that was in that Scry pile.
Yeah, I get that. That makes sense.
Yep.
So on kind of how the card actually plays out, I think this is really good at finding your fourth land. And that is an aspect that I think a lot of blue mid-range decks really want to be able to have, is to be able to say, I can actually hit the cards that start being my haymakers, and I can guarantee that that's going to happen.
Yeah, it's like, this is a very fine card. This isn't a card that I'm going to play in a lot of decks, but there's definitely use in considering this card, especially in, say, a combo deck that wants to keep lower land hands to keep a bunch of draw spells or a bunch of interaction spells. Also, talking about divinations, this card gets around effects like Narset, effects that care about drawing cards. It's just ignores. Speaking back to that blue-green turns deck that you played a while ago, Blightning, there was a very important game where you had you had a Narset, but your opponent still had Shimmer of Possibility and what was the 3-mana Shimmer? There's still the more cards
that get around Narset, and this is, I feel like, one that has a bit more utility than some of the others.
Yeah. For sure. This is definitely just this is a card that isn't going to get into a lot of decks. Like Dan Kids mentions, there's a lot of good 2-mana cantrips, but there are going to be times where you want a 3-mana draw to, and there are decks that really want to take advantage of that, especially if you're, say, a combo deck, or if you're a mid-range deck that is getting greedy might be the wrong word, but getting a little pushing yourself to be on the more aggressive hands.
Yeah, this is definitely the best divination on Arena.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty close.
Yeah, it's definitely a case of it gets generally what you want at points that you want it. The only problem is that it otherwise is divination, which is a tolerable card, but its biggest problems are in its mana cost and in its timing, and Bounty of the Deep doesn't really solve either of those, but at being a divination, it's really good.
Yeah. It's this is just this is the card that's going to slot in. We don't talk about budget. I want to put in heavy quotation marks because the wildcard system is not great for anyone, but a lot of people have a common wildcard or two laying around, and this is definitely a card that can get in over other cards until you have the ability to craft what you need. Yeah. This is a card that, if this card sees play, I'm not going to be surprised. And if this card is never talked about again after the next month or two, I would also not be surprised.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it really shows kind of some of the interesting applications of what these arena designs can do. And we have another one of those. It's Kiora, the Tide's Fury. It's 3 and a blue for a 4 loyalty legendary Kiora planeswalker, and it has 2+1 abilities. The first is to conjure a Kraken hatchling into your hand, which is just a single blue for a 0/4 Kraken with no abilities. Its second +1 is to untap target creature or land, Prevent all damage that would be dealt to and dealt by that permanent until your next turn. And then a -3, you may sacrifice a Kraken. If you do, create an 8/8 blue Kraken creature token. This card is kind of interesting to look at, and I think its biggest application is that it has 2+1s that both work pretty well defensively, and then a -3 that can close out games.
Yeah.
Notably, that +1 also untaps lands, so you can use it as a effective second copy of the War of the Spark Kiora, just at 4 mana instead. And also, it preventing combat damage by, preventing all damage by
damage
to any creature that you want is a pretty big ability, although it doesn't apply to certain creatures or effects because they nullify damage prevention.
Target
Nice Hell
your,
Rider you have there.
Yeah.
Would be a shame if something happened to it.
target your Hazaret, please and thank you.
And then they just stomp you to death anyway.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Like there are gonna be times where you plus this and then they're just like honk and kill you anyway. But just like this is one of those cards where I could see this being very big, especially honestly targeting Overgrown Battlements is a card that we talked about earlier. Like Overgrown Battlements is a card that sees play in these more controlling strategies that want to ramp, and being able to untap that and prevent the damage that's dealt to it. This means that they can't they can't bolt it or whatever out of the way. They can't do that, and then it gets to block for free whatever you want.
Yeah,
yeah. That's on Paradise Druid, I think. But same
Yeah,
concept.
Paradise. Yeah, but still, just like the same idea is there, right? Where it's like this. You get to prevent all the damage dealt to and by it, which means it just gets to free block whatever you want.
What's that card? Fog Wall?
Wall of Mist.
No, it's 2 mana for an 0/2 Dinosaur Wall?
What?
What?
I remember the art.
Sorry, what?
Yeah, we do
it
not
has a
have
raptor
dinosaur
in the
wall.
art.
Wall?
It's an 0/2 for 2
0/2
mana
wall,
that takes no combat damage
Alright.
with flying and defender.
Fogbank?
Art.
It might be Fogbank.
Fogbank doesn't have a dinosaur on it, but it
what
is
are you
that text.
talking about with dinosaurs?
The last time I saw this card was about 7 years ago. Give me some slack.
Oh wait,
All right,
the
you know what?
original art
Absolutely not.
does.
Oh,
The-
that's
the
because its
original art
commander.
does.
Its original art has dinosaurs
Okay, never
inside the
mind.
Fogbank. Okay.
All right.
Why are there dinosaurs in there? What?
Don't worry about
I
it.
mean, the
They're in the
fog kind
fog.
of looks like a Stegosaurus.
No. Put up
Like-
the old printing of Fogbank.
Yeah.
No, I just want to talk about the fog because the fog also looks like a dinosaur.
Yeah. The
That one's a bit more iffy.
the
But
iconic
these are actual dinosaurs.
the iconic Masters Fogbank just looks like hands. How many hands are in this
no.
Fogbank?
No,
Wait,
moving
Those are
on.
fingers. Look at them. Those are fingers.
I'm
Next.
just surprised that the Fogbank managed to avoid the dinosaur retyping.
That would have been funny, wouldn't it?
Welcome to the Fogbank podcast.
Would it
Yeah,
have been the
but-
only mono blue dinosaur?
No,
I
not
no.
anymore. At
No.
least.
doubt it.
Not anymore. Not anymore. We got
Non-legendary.
the
There's
no. We got the 4 mana 6/6, the illusion dinosaur.
Oh,
just-
yes.
Just got it.
I mean,
Not
also
this-
like as a whole.
Yeah, as a whole.
Uh,
It would have been one of a few.
speaking of
Yeah.
cards with hands, our next card is Mentor of Evos Isle. A 3 mana
There's
2/1
Aww.
flying bird wizard. And
Yes.
it says, when it enters a battlefield, choose a creature card in your hand. It perpetually gains flying. Well, shit.
So
That seems good.
yeah.
this only
I
has
hadn't looked at that art.
4 arms, but I am offended by all of them.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how I feel about this card. This card is a 3-mana 2/1. I want to be very clear when I say this is a 3-mana 2/1. When I talk about this card and its possibilities, I am very clearly admitting this is a 3-mana 2/1, and that may just be not good enough, even though this effect is powerful. But I'm very curious to try this out, and I've been playing a lot of Bant midrange recently, trying to sell the sort of blue aggressive midrange strategies. And this is a card that I will admit may not be good enough, but giving some very, very important cards flying can be insane in some matchups. Being able to give, say, a Nadar flying. Being able to give, say, a Questing Beast flying. And we'll get to that in a second. But just, this card does a lot of things that, again, I am more than willing to accept may just be, oh, you know, I tried this once and I cut it. Right? Like, that may end up being the thing. Like, it came into play once and it did nothing. I am more than willing to say right now that might end up being the result of this card. But
I would say that it has similar application to how Seismic uses Whirler Rogue here and there.
I think Whirler Rogue is better. It makes 3 bodies.
Similar application.
Yeah, I want to say some content and bring up some weird or oft forgotten limited cards.
Yeah, before we get too distracted, Seismic, Joker does have to pay the tax.
Yeah. Questing Beast is 2 green for an enchantment aura. It says enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/+2 and has whenever this creature attacks, untap all lands you control, and it has totem armor.
So anyway, Trusted Pegasus is a fairly similar card, honestly, to this. It's a 3-mana 2x flyer with a way to give other creatures flying.
Yeah, there's a few effects like this.
Yeah. These are cool and
Not
limited,
good.
and they're good and limited, but they have this problem in Constructed where they're not anywhere close to enough. And I don't think this is this is better, but I don't think it's enough good in order to make me want to play a 3-mana creature with 2 power and an ability that doesn't really do much for me.
Sure.
And in case you watching at home are wondering why we're even talking about these cards if we're so down on them, we wanted to talk about the full cycle of enter the battlefield, give keyword perpetually.
Yeah, and it's like, and some of them are very good, and like this is probably like, this is not the worst of them. The green one's pretty bad, but this one is just like, this one is one where it's like, it's so close to being possible that I want to talk about it because people are probably going to talk about it because flying is very important, especially if you can sneak this onto a creature with haste, a creature with like vigilance,
with
a creature with Galta. Yeah, like if you can. Oh. But just like, there are some cards that if they get flying, it's just like, well, I didn't realize you've already won this game. Like, again, like I'm more than willing to admit that this card ends up just being not good enough. It's a 3-mana 2/1 that has flying, but that's not good enough. And I'm saying that right now, so don't get mad at me if this card isn't good. But I'm willing to say that maybe some people should try it because of its utility and interesting utility. Next card.
Speaking of cards with interesting utility, Joker.
Yeah, speaking of cards that people are probably going to give me shit about, but I think are worth trying. Shoreline Scout. It's white. It's a blue mana. It's a blue mana for a 1/1 Merfolk Scout. Shoreline Scout says, when Shoreline Scout enters the battlefield, you may exile a Merfolk card or a land card from your hand. If you do, conjure a tropical island into your hand. Tropical island is a forest island.
Yep.
No other text. And then also, Shoreline Scout says, as long as another merfolk or an island enter the battlefield under your control this turn, Shoreline Scout gets +1/+0.
You see, I agree with you, Dan Kids. Joker has other opinions.
Yes. So people are going to be like, great, goes into merfolk. Cool. Yes,
If you do,
but
place-
also,
conjure $800 into your hand.
yeah, conjure $800
Minimum.
So here's the thing. People are like, great, goes into blue green merfolk. It's a merfolk and it says merfolk on it. But guess what? I think it goes in more decks. I think it's good enough to go into a lot of blue mid-range decks as long as it has green in it. So I was talking about this with the others a bit before the show started, and the biggest thing is I don't think you need to be playing that many merfolk for this card to be good. I think you need to be playing lands in your deck for this to be good. There's going to be a lot of times, a lot of decks, a lot of 3-color decks, a lot of 2-color decks. There's a lot of times where you're just like, oh, look at this Triumph in my hand. Like the amount of times you're going to keep dual land enters tapped, and then maybe a dual land enters untapped because of your other lands. And you just look at your hand, it's like, man, this hand's so slow. But I'm going to keep it because my mana's good. This is a card that smooths out those hands. It says, oh, great, this Triumph that taps for blue and green. Cool, it's now a tropical island.
Mhm. Also,
It's like-
remember, it does specify merfolk, but
Yeah,
some people I've seen were talking about how you might have to exile a island. It's not an island. It's any land from your hand.
any land.
It doesn't like that's the bigger thing, right? It's not a it's not a creature that you're playing to be aggressive. It's not a creature you're playing like in Merfolk, of course, it's pretty good as an aggressive threat. But in the case where Joker is talking about, and I can't guarantee you that I fully agree with your stance there, Joker. But
Sure.
what you're describing is more, this is a 1-mana sorcery that says discard a land card, draw a tropical island.
I don't think it's that niche at all, Dan Kids,
I know, but,
especially
like-
in... Yeah, no, sorry, to just, like... I don't think it's that niche at all to say that, especially in 3-color decks, where you can have upwards of 5 to 6 triumph, like, you can have all 5 or 4 triumph, like, you have 4 to 5 triumphs in your deck, or 5 to 7 to 9 cards that are basically E-to-B tapped fix my mana lands in this format. Or we talked earlier about Archmage's Charm, right? Where one of the biggest things was sometimes you have this utility land in your hand, and sometimes that utility land doesn't matter in the matchup. Guess what? Now it's a tropical island. And, like, I'm going to be very clear that I'm going to push this card a lot because this is a card that we don't have a lot of cards that do this. We don't have a lot of cards that fix you, that smooth out hands. We don't have cards like that. This is not an effect that Arena, like the Arena has, that Gladiator has. Not on a creature, not in this way, not immediately. We don't have a lot of smoothing creatures. And a lot of people are going to talk about, like, blue doesn't need more 1-drops, blue-green doesn't need more 1-drops. Not how blue-green is built currently, sure. But this is the card that allows you to experiment in how you build those lists differently. This is a card that, in conjecture with other cards, you get to, like, I'm not going to say greedy, but, like, this card is going to let you keep more hands. And that's the biggest thing. The more times that I'm able to keep a 6 because of this card, or a 7 because of this card, because it allows me to curve out when my hand would have been awkward otherwise, great. Like, we're playing cards that aren't amazing. Like, people are playing the Snow Duels. Like, those cards are fine because they have the land types and allow your other lands to enter untapped. Like, people are playing Snarls because the Snarls can enter untapped. Like, there are cards that are being played because, guess what? They have a chance of making your hand more consistent. This card does that. And, like, sure, it's going to look like, oh, this is a 1-mana 2/1 in blue. Who needs that? But guess what? Sometimes it's a 1-mana 2/1, and he's like, great, it's a 1-mana 2/1. And also, like, this is probably the most niche thing I'm going to say with this card, is that there are going to be times where you have a Fabled Passage with this card, and this gets to be a 2/1 blocker. Again, I want to be very clear when I say that is a very niche thing, but it's something that can happen, and that's You know, it may be a line of a mild play that you have to take. But
On
this
that
card
line of
just
thought,
yeah, sure, of course.
with that line of thought, I have 2 decks that I think might want this card that in order of hotness, as in how hot the take is. In blue-green lands, having Lay of the Land effects is pretty nice, and having a way to get a really generically good land is pretty useful. And because you have multiple ways to copy lands, you have things that let you do cool stuff when you're looping lands, or when you are, when you need to use a land card in some cool way. The fact that this conjures a tropical island and it's not like an island token or anything, it's a surprisingly interesting effect that makes me want to try it out in lands. In a different deck, I actually want this because it's a 1 mana, potentially 2/1, and that's Vannifar combo, because a lot of the potential lines we are going to be seeing now out of Vannifar combo need to be comboing off from either sacrificing Corridor Monitor or sacrificing a 1-drop, and Shoreline Scout represents decent 1 mana creatures for that. We don't have many of those, or at least good utility 1-drop creatures. And if a Vannifar combo deck is going to exist in a really nice way, it's going to do so by having a lot of really good utility 1-drop creatures that you sacrifice into game-winning plays.
Yeah, I can definitely see it popping into both those decks. Maybe a bit less in lands, but I definitely see the utility of being like, oh, cool, I don't need this, I wish I remembered the name of the blue-green snow duel right now, but it's like, oh, good, this is a tropical island now. But, yeah, just, Shoreline Scout baseline, it's going to be a card that people look at and just go, eh. But I think that this card deserves a lot more respect and deserves to at least be tried. In a lot of decks should want to try this effect. Yeah, I've talked about this card enough. Now let's go on to, speaking of infinitely long conversations, our next card is
Tome of the Infinite. 2 and a blue for a legendary artifact with an activated ability. 1 blue, and tap it. Conjure a random card from Tome of the Infinite's spellbook into your hand. That card perpetually gains, you may spend mana as though it was mana of any color to cast this spell. And if you give me one moment, the spellbook is as follows. Light of Hope. 1 white mana, or you gain 4 life, destroy an enchantment, or put a 1/1 counter on target creature. Swords to Plowshares. You know what that card does. Force Spike. Mana Tithe but blue. Ponder. Best draw spell. Dark Ritual. Duress.
Takes 3 mana.
Yeah, Dark Ritual makes 3 mana. Duress. I'm passing over the ones that are already on Arena.
Sure.
Assault Strobe, sorcery speed, target creature gets double strike until end of turn. Lightning Bolt, you know what that does. Fog, 1 green, prevent all combat damage, and then Giant Growth. Again, a known card. So, the utility of Tome of the Infinite is very interesting. You can't really guarantee exactly what you're looking for, because there's 10 options. So if you're just targeting one piece, it's not as great as one would hope. But the cool thing about Tome of the Infinite is that in a lot of situations with 2 mana producing permanents and a paradox engine, you can potentially just win. The issue is you can't guarantee it, because sometimes you get too many Swords to Plowshares. Yeah.
So Force Spike was the first card that I saw here in this list that made me think, oh, this stops me from, going infinite with a Tome of the Infinite. And that's fine. because you just, have the paradox trigger happen in response to the force spike still, in response to whatever spell you're casting to start the paradox loop. You activate it again, and if you get force spike, you just force spike whatever spell you cast.
Yeah, the force
However,
spike does stop you if you get it for the first activation of Tome and you're trying to use that the Tome to start the loop.
yeah. Swords is really interesting because if your goal in a given board state is to not get swords or not have a swords resolve, you have about a 92% chance to be okay in like one string of activations of Tome of the Infinite, because you have a flat 90% chance to not hit swords, and then you have a 1% chance to hit swords and then hit force spike, and then you also have
fine.
yeah, which makes things okay. And then you have this like weird area of approaching 1% but not quite getting there, of hitting swords to plowshares, then hitting an instant any amount of times in a row, and then hitting a force spike.
Basically, the worst thing that can happen if you're trying to swords your own creature and not make a resolve is going swords into Assault Strobe.
Yep.
And
Assault Strobe is the real problem in the spell book for making it happen.
Well,
Because if Assault Strobe wasn't in the set of options to target, we'd have no issue just activating ad infinitum and eventually having enough lightning bolts to kill them.
Yeah, so the issues here are that we have a few sorceries.
One sorcery.
And then Assault Strobe, Duress, and Ponder
yes, you're right.
Right.
You're
are
right.
all sorceries. And then so we have 3 sorceries in here. And we have Giant Growth, Assault Strobe, and Swords to Plowshares as spells you can only cast if there's a creature on the board.
And Swords removes the creatures.
Yeah, and Swords removes those creatures. So you have a very weird dichotomy, but the truth is that you're going to get a lot of spells cast off of Tome of the Infinite in most board states that involve at least one creature. It's just not technically infinite and requires a lot of potentially weird finagling in order to make it work, which
also
is
you
something
can
I really
fix it
enjoy.
in a different way. Where you can fix it with a single creature with if you manage to hit force spike before you hit a sorcery. That's the way that you can fix it. You can also fix it by just having a pyromancer effect in play.
Yeah, so things like Pyromancer and Saheeli are the best ones that come to mind. That let you, for every swords that you get, you've probably created a few ways to throw swords under the bus.
Yeah. But honestly, my biggest part with this card when it comes to like Paradox combo is that this is a win con that you can whir for, which is not entirely the case with other win cons that like the Paradox deck is looking at. Like, sure, you win, quotation mark, like you win when you get Aetherflux Reservoir into play, but you still need to cast spells after that. Like, this is
the other thing, right? Is that right now we're just talking about like you have 2 mana and you're doing this to loop exactly these spells and only these spells. That's not the case for most Paradox Engine boards.
Yeah,
it's like okay, my Paradox Engine board is Paradox Engine, Tome of the Infinite, Hedron,
Vessel.
Like Firemind's Vessel. Like this is assuming that is your whole board.
The best part about that is that it's not even just those, because Tome of the Infinite will eventually give you more tools in order to keep progressing this. As like Dan Kid's notes in chat, Ponder lets you continually draw cards if you hit that a few times, so that you are more likely to still have a spell as backup if you end up getting to a spot where Tome of the Infinite can't make you another card to cast immediately. Or like Dark Ritual produces extra mana. Lightning Bolt kills potential problem creatures, as does Swords. Light of Hope keeps gaining you life so that you can survive a turn or two if, things go south.
You do fizzle.
Yeah. Tome of the Infinite is also just, I think, a good card.
I don't know. It's hard to say.
So I might try this in that same mono blue control deck that I was talking about.
And you can activate Tome at instant speed in a control deck, which means you can use it with things like Wilderness Reclamation. You can also use it in instances where you have 2 mana up. You can either bluff a counterspell as well as a potential Tome of the Infinite activation and cast. And it gives blue a lot of things that it doesn't normally get, be in the form of discard, direct damage, fogs, and hard removal. So many cool, interesting things. And I think this might just be a decent card in blue-focused control decks that, like, even if you're getting like the mediocre or even actively bad cards out of Tome of the Infinite, if you activate this a few times, it's still like a 3-mana artifact with blue tap, draw a card.
Assault Strobe, your God Eternal Cabinet. Who cares?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, Assault Strobe makes things suck a bit more, but you have a lot of really cool cards in this pile.
Yeah, and like, you're blue, you have ways to discard cards for value.
Yeah.
If you really need to.
I think that this card is not only a really good Paradox card, it's also just a generically pretty good card.
Yeah, just the power of all these 1-cost options is really just impressive.
Yeah. Another really good 1-cost option for killing creatures is Bone Shards, a sorcery for 1 black mana that has, as an additional cost to cast the spell, sacrifice a creature or discard a card to destroy target creature or planeswalker. So this isn't a force effect, because A, most force effects are instant, and B, it does cost mana, but it's so cheap that this kills like so many problem threats very early on, including planeswalkers, and by the time discard a card is too bad of a cost, sacrifice a creature is usually an easy cost.
And then you have the cases where it's no longer a cost, and then you're just happy. Madness cards with Bone Shards, we're getting some of those. Things that
Aristocrats,
like dying.
Aristocrats is at least a state of mind. And turns out creatures dying, some people like that, myself included.
Sacrifice my pest that I got off of Sedgemoor Witch, get another pest back.
Yep. Easy to make Bone Shards even better than it already is. Because at the base level, it's you pay 2 cards to get rid of a thing without having to spend tempo, basically.
Yeah, this is
paying 1 mana to remove a thing that is more than 1 mana is up in tempo.
Oh yeah, this is also a push for, like, as mentioned in chat, Reanimator. Just like, even though we don't have the traditional Reanimator cards to make it that great, we got some new cards to set for it. And this card just being like, discard my, I don't know, my Porkanos, my, like, they're a card that you're going to discard this, so like, great, I get to bring that back later.
Yep.
So, Joker and Blightning, y'all have, I think, Blight, you've done some things with God Pharaoh's Gift. Joker Boney, I know you've done things with God Pharaoh's Gift.
Yes.
Mardu GPG?
Yeah,
I
this
feel
is
forgotten.
great for Mario GPG. Also,
Oh, yeah, this goes in JPG.
slight side note. This is a great lands card as well. Discard land played off of Ramadap Excavator.
Oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
being able to use this as a discard outlet is like actually really interesting.
Black
for
doesn't
stuff
really
like
have many of those.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of discard outlets now in this set that we had a surprising lack of before.
Don't worry, all the discard outlets were in Azorius before.
Yep.
Yeah,
Don't
just where
remind
you
me.
wanted them.
Don't remind me.
There's
My
some good-
stomach dropped when I went through the spoiler when it released, and the first card I saw that said discard a card on it was Aquamoeba.
Don't worry.
Uh,
Our next card will make you feel nice and cozy.
Can't come soon enough.
Speaking of which,
Cabal Initiate is 1 in the black for a 2/1 human warlock. With the text discard a card, Cabal Initiate gains lifelink until end of turn. I didn't even care to read that part. Also has Threshold. Cabal Initiates gets +1/+2 as long as 7 or more cards are in your graveyard. Also, cool, I guess. You see, this card effectively has 3 words in its text box. Discard a card with no other cost. Some marginal benefit, but the real benefit is the fact that it's 2 mana, and you can discard your entire hand to it if you really wanted to. Why does that matter? Well, there's a few cards. You have some Madness cards that like being discarded. We have some Hypno Toads that like seeing lands to be discarded. And this is the start of Gitrog monster in my perception. I'm just very sad that they were too chicken to print any cards with the word dredge on them in this set.
Yeah. I will also
I
mention,
can't say I
speaking
blame
of GPG decks,
Would it harm you so much to say, give me a 5-mana sorcery that just conjures a Dakmor Salvage to my hand?
Yeah,
God.
probably.
Don't
Given what you would get to do with it.
Don't speak that evil into this world.
if you're
I
gonna
will
give
say,
me Drakmor Salvage, at least get me Seismic Assault as well.
I mean, I was assuming that if we got anything, we would have just gotten shenanigans, but we didn't.
Shenanigans
but-
would have been good.
Honestly, I think the funniest part about this is that in GPG decks, this gets to be a 5/6
Oh yeah.
because
Yeah,
that
I
plus
also
1
think,
plus 2.
like, this card's just a good body.
This is
like-
this. If
Like,
your
getting
deck
Threshold
can support
isn't
it,
too difficult if you're playing a deck that like cares about its graveyard, right?
Like,
Yeah.
Like, that's
marginally
just
harder
one-
than Delirium, but not by much.
That's one Stitcher supplier, right?
yeah.
Like you have ways of putting cards in your graveyard, and like stuff like Escape can make that a bit awkward at times, but you should be able to reasonably get this going without much trouble. And then it's
We
a
have-
3/3 that you can pitch cards to make lifelink. It's just good.
We have a couple cards eventually later in this stream that we're going to talk about that fill up the graveyard really well.
Yeah.
And a Cabal Initiate, gonna put it out here, potentially a good way to pay off having a lot of cards in your graveyard. And this is a callback all the way back to, I believe, our first set review of Historic Anthology 3? Maybe 4?
Uh,
No.
We're talking about
can't
that
be-
deck again. Yes.
We're talking about
Really?
spider spawning, and I'm saying, I'm putting it out here now. I think that spider spawning, if there's going to be a reason that it's better, it's going to be because we're getting threshold cards, and because we're getting cards that fill up the graveyard incredibly well.
Yeah, I'll talk about it with this. I'll talk about it with Cabal Initiate. I talked about it before when we got the Praetors. If there's ever a time for there to be a Sultai Dredge adjacent list, this is the time. There is so many cards that care about and feed off of the graveyard and fill the graveyard now more than ever, that I think that list is going to be very, very real. And speaking about real, this Planeswalker is real because this is real life. Davriel Soul Break.
I don't know if we want to promise our viewers reality, but it's close enough for all intents and purposes.
Davriel Soul Broker is 2 black for a legendary Planeswalker Davriel.
Hello.
+1, until your next turn, whenever an opponent attacks you or a Planeswalker you control, they discard a card. If they can't, they attack and they sacrifice an attacking creature. Jesus, this card! Just off that. Yes! Give me it!
Yeah.
Black control. I want it. Now. And then -2, accept one of Davriel's offers, then accept one of Davriel's conditions. Now, we will talk about this very quickly. Davriel's offers, I do too. I'm going to read it. It's just Davriel's offers and conditions. Very quickly talk about how this is presented to you. When you activate this, you are given 3 options for the offer. You pick one, then you are given 3 options for the condition from these lists of 8. Davriel's offers. Draw 3 cards. Conjure a Manor Guardian into your hand. It's a 3 mana 4/3 that when it dies, each player seeks a 2 mana card, 2 mana value card,
2 or less.
2 or less. Okay, and then next, return 2 random creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. They perpetually gain +1/+1. Return a random creature card with the highest mana value from among your cards in the graveyard to the battlefield. You get an emblem with creatures you control, get +2/+0. You gain an emblem with your spells spells you cast cost a black less to cast. Does not decrease generic. You get an emblem that says Davriel Planeswalkers you control have +2, draw a card. And then you get an emblem with whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. And then his conditions. You lose 6 life. Who cares? Exile 2 cards from your hand. If fewer than 2 cards were exiled this way, each opponent draws equals to difference.
Care
Awkward.
about that one.
Care about that one. Sacrifice 2 permanents. Depends on how late the game is. Each creature you don't control perpetually gets +1/+1. Usually don't care about that one.
Especially if you don't have any creatures.
Yeah. Which this card, make sure it doesn't happen. You get an emblem with creatures you control get -1/-0. Depends on the deck. Usually don't care. If you're playing like the Rock, you might care. You get an emblem with spells you cast cost a black more to cast. This one's awkward. Don't choose this one.
Yeah, this one's actually probably my least favorite of them.
Yeah.
Or you choose both the offer and condition and just do nothing.
Do nothing, yes. You get an emblem with whenever you draw a card, exile the top 2 cards of your library. Like we don't want this one.
I think this one's pretty free.
It's pretty free, but you still probably don't want it.
It's a weird
And then
one. I don't
emblem.
know how to actually feel about it, because it also
you get an
just
emblem with
gets rid of your deck with Peer into the Abyss.
Yeah. You get an emblem with at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each creature you control. Again, depends on the list for this one. Usually you won't care about this one, but if you're playing like a black-green mid-range control list, you may care more. Like, mileage may vary on that one, and the creatures you control get -1/-0. But then, finally, for the -3 on this card, target creature perpetually gets -3/-3.
So UFO.
I'm sorry?
You were laughing at spells cost black less and black more to cast. You won't be laughing in Jumpstart Historic Horizons 2 when we get emblems matter payoffs. It's coming.
Oh, don't speak that into this world.
Don't, Effie.
So speaking of honestly, I think that's the worst case scenario where you go black less and then black more, because then this effectively did nothing.
And you just move 2 counters.
I think
you just wasted an activation.
I think honestly,
I do want to say something about this.
Yes.
You are never getting the worst option at any given time, unless
Correct.
you choose so. You're always getting, at the very least, the third worst options in either of these two lists. So if you see one of these and you're like, wow, that sucks, either in the offers or conditions, you never have to take that one if you don't want to. And there's enough good options, and like the general quality of them are like not that bad. Enough that I think Davriel's -2 is generally going to be pretty good.
I think that this card is generally going to be very good. Sorry, when I saw this card get printed, I love this card. I love Planeswalkers that, like, I love how this card synergizes with itself. I love how it takes advantage of things. I love how, even though the -2 is pretty wonky, I'm not gonna lie, this card just, like, it does so much cool stuff. The +1 being very potent if you're playing a discard-centric deck, like if you're playing the I'm going to cast a Skull Raid at some point in this game, or like I'm gonna cast a Bedazzle, or like it's like, or sorry, not Bedazzle.
The new Mind Rot.
There is a new Mind Rot. That one's pretty good. Yeah.
There's
Go Blank is a pretty good Mind Rot. I'm thinking of the Rakdos Mind Rot that deals 2 damage to them. It's Carnival Carnage. Got there. Perfect. But yeah, just like if you're playing a deck that cares about making your opponent discard cards, or like just attritioning their hand, just like making them have to choose what matters most, and then punishing them when they make the wrong decision, because there's going to be times where they attack, they pay the cost to discard a card, and then you doomblade the creature that they were making get in. And then it's just like, great.
Joker
Amazing.
Bunny,
Awesome. Yes.
you do know that you didn't have to dig as deep as Mind Rots to talk about like good cards that make people discard. Like, we have Croxa, Rankle, and Liliana Waker of the Dead.
I know. Liliana Waker of the Dead, also one of my favorite Magic cards. I like Black Planeswalkers a lot.
We don't have to play Mind Rots, Joker Bunny, for this card to be good.
I know. Sorry, I've been looking at other formats recently, and I almost said Rakdos Return, so I was trying to like no mind twists yet. But yeah, point being is that this card does a lot of cool stuff, and this -3 looks very unassuming until you target their Rekindling Phoenix, or their Phoenix of Ash, or their
that sort of stuff. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Or their Elder Gargaroth. It's like,
or your Vesper Lark, because this also does that.
Or your Vesper Lark. This also does that.
You can force your opponent into a draw that way. Well, you could with Withering as well, but I think it's more funny to just say, like, I'm losing this game, but they have a Vesper Lark and no other targets.
Yeah. Like, just the fact that, like, importantly, like, if you're a graveyard-centric black deck, like, black control deck, like you're playing, if you're playing, like, threshold cards, you care about your graveyard, right? If you minus on a Scavenging Ooze and then kill it, they can never bring it back, because it enters as a -1, like as a -1/-1. They never have a chance to activate it after that. So, like,
this can never.
Well, okay. If your opponent has double Anthem, you're scared
you used a word that was very definite, and there was a situation where the definite was no longer true. Moving on. In this set also are a few new toys for rats. And the one that we're obligated to talk about is Plaguecrafter's Familiar. 1 and a black for a 1/1 rat with Death Touch. And when it enters the battlefield, choose a creature card in your hand, and that creature also perpetually gains Death Touch. Have you ever wanted a first striking Death Touch creature?
Yeah, we got one in AFR.
Have you ever wanted one that's not a 1/1, or one that can do it on defense?
Alright, so we target our Thalia.
There's the Night Cycles.
Yeah.
The one from Dominaria.
Yeah, Knight of Grace, Knight of I forget the other one.
the Knight of Not Grace.
Yeah.
But
The Knight of Grace, remove the K.
yeah,
Oh
And-
my! I'm still like physically recoiling at the thought of Plaguecrafter's familiar choose Thalia.
Yeah, that was pretty good. Also, people have
we have some pingers.
Yeah, there's some pingers. We got Porky Parrot.
We don't have Is It Static Caster yet.
We don't have
unfortunately.
his Staticaster
But
yet.
we do have Weaver of Lightning.
Yeah, there's Weaver of
gross.
Lightning, which is alright.
Mayhem Devil. Yeah.
Yeah.
Chain Whirler.
Judith.
Oh,
is
Chain
one-
Whirler
Yeah.
both is a pinger with first strike.
I was gonna say Hey Judith, but that one also works.
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
So
we have a
turns
lot
out-
of creatures that just deal damage. And giving them Death Touch is good when
indeed.
they deal damage to creatures.
And there's also what I don't remember the name of it. It's the Vraska that no one remembers because it's the uncommon one from War. Of the
Oh, the
Spark.
one with creatures with death
Swarm's
touch.
Eminence.
Whenever a creature with death touch hits a player
It's a
or
planeswalker.
planeswalker, it gets
Planeswalker.
bigger.
It gets a +1/+1 counter.
Yeah.
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 We don't yet have any reason that +1/+1 counters like that will be infinite, but we are getting Monoskeleton. Which,
Skellion, not skeleton.
Monoskeleton, which
Unfortunate.
allows you to just do +1 damage to a player every turn.
Oh no,
Yeah. It's for
One
two
one
mana
mana
damage.
One mana. One
it's
mana
one mana?
equals 1 damage for the activation. 2 mana to play.
Yeah.
1 mana for the activation.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
just trade. Yeah. So like again, this isn't infinite, but like you can
Not,
you
like,
can
crazy.
turn every piece of mana you have into damage to their face if you want.
If you want to
Yeah.
make this weird combo happen, yeah.
Yeah.
And then like once
Thankfully,
you
we
get
don't have Walking Ballista for this because that
or
would be
Triskelion or anything like that.
Yeah.
nothing free to do with it.
But we do we do have a few things that will do some amount of ping damage to opponent's creatures, and having Death Touch is pretty good. And then also just like
Yeah.
a 2 mana 1/1 Death Toucher isn't that terrible in combat, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
like,
it's not just a 2 mana one. It's effectively a 2 mana for multiple creatures with death touch.
Yep.
And the reason that creatures with death touch are sometimes not great is because it inherently leads to either a 1-for-1 or less than a 1-for-1. And Plaguecrafter's Familiar kind of dodges that problem. It's a 1-for-1 that makes another creature much easier to get value off of.
Mm-hmm.
And similarly to the others, Magic kind of, at the very least, how Magic has been designed, sometimes breaks if you give random things keywords, and Death Touch is one of those.
Yep.
this also
Speaking
just gets
of,
very.
Breaking design.
What if we just color shifted a card?
Indeed. I believe this is your
Ransack
card,
the lab.
Seismic.
Yes. So Ransack the Lab is 1 and a black for a sorcery that we've seen in blue on Arena.
Trap planning.
Yeah. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand, and the rest into your graveyard. Ransack the Lab is this is a color shifted reprint. Being in black is really nice for the fact that black cares the most about things in graveyard, and it's good to see that Ransack the Lab is finally here, finally doing gonna be doing things in Gladiator, and is one of multiple cards that fills the graveyard really well. The other one, the other big one is like Winding Way, which fills the graveyard up by potentially 5 in one fell swoop. So you got good ways to fill up the graveyard now. in black and potentially in exclusively black, which is something that I'm very excited to see how the format works with that.
Honestly, I just love this for like Mardu Pyromancer. Just like give me more cantrips. Give me another card that fuels my Kroxa or my Phoenix Vash. I was like,
Yeah.
oh great, I get to walk 3 deep, get a lightning bolt to cast or whatever. Just like it's fuel.
Simple card.
Yeah, it's so simple, so nice.
And Seismic getting more complex.
So
You've got another card you really wanted on this list.
yeah, we do. Do we want to take a break here for a moment, get our bearings, and come back for our next card?
Because we're going to the next color. Halfway
Yeah.
through, basically. Yeah, I'm for it.
Yeah, this feels like a
Okay.
nice place to drop it.
We'll be right back.
Wonderful. See you all in a couple of minutes.
And we're back.
Oh, I didn't see you come in there.
So hello
We're
there.
back.
You just walked into a conversation with me and my great friend, Brea's apprentice. And also, the other crew of this great podcast, the Gladiator podcast.
Brea's Apprentice. Brea's Apprentice.
Brea's apprentice is 2 in a red for a 2/3 artifact creature, human artificer. And when it enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying. And then you can tap and sacrifice an artifact to choose one. Exile the top of card of your library. Until the end of your next turn, you may play that card, or target creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn. This card does a lot for artifact-based aggressive decks, and it has a lot of really... it's kind of... it's a weird card because the Thopter's good, and tapping Brea's Apprentice is generally bad because it's a 2/3, and that's a tolerable body. But the effects it gives are pretty good and really cement that there is a red-inclusive artifact deck, and that deck throws artifacts at their opponent in multiple ways.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this I don't know how much I'm going to be playing this card. Honestly, even in those like red centric artifact decks, I have a spicy red black artifact aggro list I'm going to be trying soon. But like this card probably gets in. It's a little bit on the weird side just because, you know, as you said, like we're paying 3 mana for 3/4 worth of power, and then it's like, okay, but we need to tap some of it because it can maybe get us some more advantage. So like it's gonna be interesting to see how often it all comes up. I do think that there is some advantage in the fact that it can sacrifice itself. So say if they are at, again, this is like corner case obviously, but there's gonna be times where they're at 3 and you like, oh great, sacrifice Brea's Apprentice, make this Thopter a 3/1, kill them.
Mm.
So it does have some utility on that end. But I think there
most
might
likely
be some...
going to be just hitting like treasure tokens as the thing they sack.
Yeah, likely.
Yeah.
Just like some treasure tokens or other stuff.
Brea's Apprentice doesn't ideally want to be sacrificing the Thopter because Thopters are really good, but there's a lot of potential for sacrificing artifacts, and it turns out just as Thopters are good artifacts, there's a lot of not so good artifacts or artifact creatures you might be playing in your deck that aren't insanely good.
Or things that like to be sacrificed.
Yeah.
Modular
and
all that.
Yeah, and there's I can't remember its name off the top of my head. It's the 1-drop from Dominaria.
Barring Contrast.
Barring Construct.
There we
Which
go.
is
I can't
a
say
1 mana
words.
1/1 that when it dies, you put a +1/+1 counter on another creature you control. And cards like that, and also the sheer like amount of modular cards we have a lot of really wanting to die artifacts, and Frey's Apprentice utilizes those really well.
Speaking of red cards that can very... Speaking of red cards that can very interestingly use resources, our next card.
Our next card is Fury Blade Vampire. This is 1 generic and a red mana for a 1/2 Vampire Berserker with Trample, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, you may discard a card. If you do, Fury Blade Vampire gets +3/+0 until end of turn. So, some of my bringing this card up is a bit of nostalgia. This is a card I remember from getting into Magic. But also, there's a lot of discard shenanigans in the set. Like we mentioned with Cabal Initiate, there's a decent number of discard outlets, and there are some Madness cards, some of which are like reasonable payoffs. And also this just hits for 4 as a 2-drop, and I think that's cool and maybe worth messing around with. Like I'm looking at this for some of the Godpharaoh's Gift decks as well, especially because it gets a power buff that interacts really well with Godpharaoh's Gift.
7/4 trample, beep beep.
Turns. Yeah, and like it just has trample naturally anyways, and I don't know, this card kind of just slaps. I don't know that it's good enough to get into like just mono red. I don't really play those decks, but I imagine you want your cards as resources a bit too much. But I'm gonna be messing around with some Rakdos Madness with this.
This pictures extra lands, I think, in that deck most of the time, or like Phoenix Vash.
Of Rakdos aggro and Rakdos Madness aggro. There's also a new card that we glossed over when making this list. 2 mana, 3/3 haste.
Rakdos Frontliner, I want to say Headliner.
Headliner, I think is the right one.
Yeah, and then it has Echo, discard a card. So Echo, just very quickly talk about it. Not gonna get too deep on it. Just like it's a 2 mana 3/3. Cool, swings in, kills them, and then guess what? If you want to keep it, because it's a 3/3 with haste, so you get to attack with it once for free, and then great, I want to keep it around. Discard a card. Cool. If not, sacrifice it. Cool. Sometimes you care about sacrifice. Even better. Next card. Speaking about caring about effects and having haste, Reckless Ringleader. I affectionately call Mohawk Goblin because I love this Mohawk on this Goblin. It's great. It has haste. 1/1 with haste, and then it says, enters the battlefield, choose a creature card in your hand, it perpetually gains haste. This is good for 2 decks, in my opinion. One being Goblins.
I think more
the other
than that,
being
sure.
I think you can get into more decks. I'm so, talking about it gains a slot immediately, and I think it's going to hold its slot in said decks for a long time.
Sure.
Yeah,
is Goblins, and we talked about this earlier.
Yeah,
this is
Vannifar
amazing combo. For Vannifar combo. This is probably one of the best 1-drops in that deck now, other than War Elves and Gilded Goose.
Yeah,
but
so
just
I think the theory is with 6 mana and the ability to cast Reckless Ringleader, Vannifar, and have 1 white open, you can win the game.
Yes, correct. I'm not going to get into the pod chain now. It's super long. We might do an episode on combo later. There might be stuff to talk about with that later, but we're not going to get into that right now. Point being is that it is a pretty complicated combo, but if you have the ability to cast this Vannifar and have a white mana open, you can win the game. Just straight out, you win. It's deterministic. You don't need to loop burrows. You don't need to loop there's other weird cards. Don't worry.
Mm-hmm.
I think Reckless Ringleader, while it has its most supplanted positions in both Vannifar combo and in Goblins, I think it's also just good in most aggressive red inclusive decks. It might not be good in mono red, or at least good enough, but in especially 2-color aggro, Ringleader does a lot of good, because if you're, say, looking at red-white death and taxes / red-white aggro, some slant of that, if I can make a creature that I play on turns like 2, 3, or 4 that doesn't have haste and is like a really powerful white creature, giving that haste will send my deck and my game plan over the edge. If I can make, for example, a Winota have haste, that'd be pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that
Crusher
crazy.
Giant
It's only
getting
4
haste.
extra damage, but
Yeah, it's 4 extra damage,
Unfortunately-
but like, just
Fortunately, not a warrior.
Ringleader works really well with good creatures that don't already have haste. And in mono red, there might be too many of those. And in other decks, though, I think there's more than enough. And like, if I'm playing this into pretty much any of green's 2 or 3 drops, that it just goes absolutely ham.
Sure.
And yes, while this isn't a warrior, it is still a rogue for party.
Yeah, it's a rogue
And
for
for
party.
Robber
It's
the
a rogue
Rich.
for Robber the Rich. I will say, speaking of 2-color, I think that if it misses any 2-color deck, like if it ends up being good enough, green-red is the one it would miss because of how many Gruul threats have haste.
I
Especially
disagree
in
with
the
you
Wisp.
entirely,
I
Joker.
don't
Maybe.
actually think that's true, given like
I don't
the
know,
green
like-
threats that don't have haste, getting haste would be huge.
There are
guess.
some cards that have haste, but a lot of the top end in green-red doesn't actually have haste, and
I guess. Like,
Reckless
sometimes you
Ringleader
give your
coming
Galta
in-
haste and you're just like, choo-choo.
yeah, that, or giving your Ilharg haste.
Or
Sure.
Yeah.
what if you gave
Galta?
sure, but also Gruul Spellbreaker both haste and a +1/+1 counter?
Yeah, I guess. I didn't
Yeah.
think about this enough with Riot being able to give them the counter every time.
Yeah, most of the haste you're getting in Gruul is through Riot, which means you have
Yeah,
other
sure.
options if they already have haste.
Yeah.
No, that's fair. And then speaking of what I really want to do with this, like, you know, like give an Aurelia haste seems pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah, turns
Anyway,
out
nice.
there's good creatures that don't have haste and would
Yeah.
be much better if they did.
Oh, for sure. And
Haste
that's
is good
good.
mechanic.
Yeah, haste good comedic.
Speaking of cards that are good at various points in the game, there's another card that's good at later points in the game. Blight, why don't you tell
Yeah.
us about that one?
Yeah, our next card is Sarkin Scorn, which is 2 and a red for an instant that reads Sarkin Scorn deals damage equal to the number of turns you have begun to target creature or planeswalker. Now, I don't know about you, but I like beginning turns. I like taking turns in games of Magic the Gathering. I tend to do it maybe more often than the average player, but I think everyone does it every now and then, I assume. And this rewards you for doing a thing you literally have no choice but to do. And scales pretty solidly when you
You
do
could always
so.
concede.
You
I
could always concede.
guess, but at that point you're not considering casting the spell. So I don't know if that changes my evaluation of it.
So honestly, my biggest thing with this card, I'm willing to try it. I'm very curious to see how it does. A lot of the time, I'm going to be comparing this to Soulseer, a card that we got in M21.
Lightning,
Yeah.
are you considering building like teamer turns then?
No. I mean, you could build like turns with red. It would have potential. I believe Odyssey has built a blue-red turns like Ral copy deck. But honestly, I'm just into this in like the Soulseer spot to like be a thing that can kill whatever on 3, but then also scale later to kill a Gargaroth or an Ilharg. Like it is a burn spell that lets you scale up to 6 damage, which we're getting many more of now, but has been somewhat rare. I do think it being 3 mana is a bit awkward because a lot of our current removal for like specifically blue-red is kind of set on being
Locked
1
in.
and 2. Yeah, and like we have very good burn spells at this point. They gave us
God,
lightning bolt.
This would be insane
Yeah.
at 2 mana.
Oh, it would be so good. But yeah, like I think this has a potential home. I'm not sure yet if it will maintain it because I could see this being a staple. I could see this dropping out in 2 months.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So this card's really interesting because it has fewer arms than I'd expect because arms are replaced with dragon.
Dragons.
A card that does that multiple times is the next new Planeswalker, Sarkin Wanderer to Shiv, which is 3 in a red for a legendary 4 loyalty Sarkin Planeswalker with a +1 that reads, Dragon cards in your hand perpetually gain this spell costs 1 less to cast, and you may pay X rather than paying this spell's mana cost, where X is its mana value. 0, conjure a Shivan Dragon card into your hand, and -2, Sarkin Wanderer to Shiv deals 3 damage to target creature. To clarify, on the +1, the reason that it makes mana costs into generic X is so that if you happen to activate Sarkin a lot of times, then you can make dragons free in your hand. And notably, this only applies to the dragon cards that are currently in your hand. So if you do a like alternating of Sarkins +1 and 0, your Shivan dragons are going to be of completely different costs.
Yeah.
And I think that this card is really interesting to see work, and I think that it is a slam dunk in decks that already care about having dragons or like care about a type line like that. Its -2 is pretty good, although it kind of seems like a middling thing to do when the alternatives are draw haymakers or make those haymakers a lot cheaper. And
It honestly feels a little bit like a filler on this card. Part of me
Yeah.
thinks that when they designed this card, they're just like, alright, it makes Shivan Dragons and makes dragons cost cheaper. Good, we're done.
yeah, what
do you mean,
What's
Ultimate?
a third thing we can do on this?
Yeah.
And-
Feels a little bit like they just wanted to make this conjure Shivan Dragon, and then and then was like, we should put another ability on here.
I would have expected you to know this, Joker, but this was actually a card. At the very least, the 0 ability was pitched by our good friend Watsy Ian from the Discord.
No, yeah, I know that part was pitched. I'm just talking about like the -2 feels like it's like, yeah, that's a thing that a red planeswalker can do. You know, versus like a Sarkin ability. If we like, it
Notably,
feels like that should say deals damage equal to dragons you control or some. Point being is that like what this card does is very neat. I think is what
Although
I've got to
I would
say.
argue, though, this card is not very good.
does this card
yeah.
see play in Dragonstorm?
Why would it?
No,
No.
not in Dragonstorm.
Doesn't do anything.
I
for
will say,
Dragonstorm.
if this card does see play, and I think that there is a chance it does, it's not great. If it sees play, it's because of the fact that it is 1 red pip versus 2 RR.
Yeah.
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 So
Like this gets into like if you're playing like there's been a blue red dragons deck that's
I
been
think if
popping
you're
up
playing
before.
maybe blue-red, I think it's probably even easier to slot into like a Grixis Dragons list where your
Yeah,
dragons
absolutely.
are a bit more pip heavy, or like Jund dragons.
or even like 5-color dragons, like Sarkon making your dragons not only cheaper but also no pips is really good. And so, you know, if you can make a Nicol the Ravager cost 3 generic, that's pretty good. If you can make Niv Mizzet
5
3/4,
generic.
4 generic mana. That's neat.
Yeah, it definitely has a lot of things that we can talk about and be like, that's a very powerful thing that can do. And I think the biggest thing is either how consistently it gets to do that very powerful thing, or how often the median case of casting a 5-mana Shivan Dragon every other turn is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that
like,
0
the answer
is...
like, it's I don't know, I think it'll be interesting to see what this card does.
Yeah, it's a very Shivan Dragon's not exactly a card you want a lot of, and Sarkon makes that aspect of Shivan Dragon really interesting.
Yeah. Speaking of making cards that you don't want in your deck interesting, our next card.
Yeah, you get to
Season's
discard
Pyromancer.
Sarkin and get an elemental instead.
Yeah.
No. You get to discard the Shivan Dragon so that you turned a card that you paid no mana to get into a real card. Enters the battlefield, discard 2 cards, then draw 2 cards. For each non-land card discarded this way, create a 1/1 red elemental. And then for 3 red, exile Seasoned Pyromancer from your graveyard, create 2 1/1 red elemental creature tokens. So, important parts about this card. It is worded in such a way that if you have no cards in hand, guess what? You draw 2 cards. Cool. Then also, a lot of times, especially, I mean, obviously, if we're talking about the Red-Black Madness deck, it's like, great, cool, you discarded cards that did something, or you discarded a card that, because you discarded it, it got to do something. But
Or
in a lot of...
just didn't matter in the matchup.
Yeah, but that's the important part, right? It's like, there's a lot of decks that have cards that aren't going to matter in some matchups, or like, say, if we're talking about red-green mid-range, you're on the back foot, discard 2 creatures that aren't, like, that won't affect the board, and then guess what? You have some more scavenging use, full fuel, and 2 blockers, and 2 new cards. And then there's, like, there's a lot of stuff going on with this card, and this is a card that's, like, that also just says 3 mana, 4 power, potentially, and draw 2 new cards. So,
Seasoned Pyromancer just does...
It's all on the card.
So much.
Yeah, it's all on the card with this one. Pretty straightforward. It does a lot of stuff. Don't sleep on this in decks that don't care about the graveyard. It's still going to be good in those decks.
It's a card that's proven itself already. I think we can move on.
Oh, for sure. Speaking of cards that have proven themselves in formats already,
our next card is Unholy Heat. Unholy Heat is a single red pip for an instant that deals 2 damage to target creature or planeswalker. Additionally, it has Delirium. Unholy Heat instead will deal 6 damage if there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard. This card has shown up a decent amount in older formats from what I know, because the cost of Delirium is pretty low given fetch lands and all. And then it just becomes 1 mana for 6 damage, which is, like I mentioned it with Sarkin Scorn. 6 damage is a lot, and not really something Red always has access to. Granted, Delirium in this format is harder to turn on. But honestly, having another shock is like still solid, and I think there are a decent number of ways, especially if you're playing some amount of looting effects, that you're going to be able to turn this on with like an instant, a sorcery, a land, and then maybe if you're playing some creatures even in control, like this card is not like, this card's still going to be good in the early game as a way to like finish off an X2, and then it has potential to scale into the late game.
Yeah, I think with the fact that we're getting cards in the form of like Curate, as you know, we put things into the graveyard as opposed to scrying them to the bottom of our library when we were digging through our deck, Unholy Heat will come online fairly consistently. Other thing, obviously, you don't need to be the person to put stuff in your graveyard. You can cast a creature and it can die, and that's how you get your creature in your graveyard.
Yeah. Notably, 6 damage is I think more than just being a lot of damage, is also kind of the breaking point for, quote unquote big decks. Like, this is a format where I don't really see creatures that are bigger than 6/6s or X6s.
In consistent play, yeah.
Yeah. In consistent, like, big splashy plays, usually it's 6. And if it's bigger than 6, then most points of damage aren't going to kill it. And 6 is where you get the things that you need to kill on sight. And red traditionally has trouble with dealing with those because, there are things like Elder Gargaroth. There are things like Kogla. Like, just big dumb idiots. And you can't really deal with them in red until the past few months. And Burning Hands and Unholy Heat, they might get slotted into a lot more decks than one might realize because they're just really big damage. Like, and the ability to kill a Gargaroth is huge.
Yeah, it's like, this card more than other cards, I think it's going to be interesting to see how often it gets turned on. There's obviously another important Delirium card that we aren't mentioning today, but just like, Delirium is an effect that is like, we don't know how it's going to do in Gladiator. Like, you could technically keep track of that information now, but it's not helpful to do because how people are going to build their decks is going to be changing, to help trying to support these. Like, someone in chat mentioned, Catmuzi mentioned Witching Well, which is a card that's like sort of been in and out of some blue control lists as an interesting draw to. That has an immediate effect as an artifact, and then also later gets to turn into a draw to. And then we've also seen cards like Omen of the Sea. Omen of the Sea has seen play in the past. It's been mostly replaced by Deliberate, but there's a chance that Omen of the Sea gets back in because of these cards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it does a really good job at being a 1-mana version of Burning Hands sometimes, and that's
for sure.
That's good enough, and it's good enough to kind of hate on what green does best, but green does other things too.
Yeah, like Freyalise, Sky Shroud Partisan, 1 green for a 4 loyalty planeswalker. What?
There is some clarity. You were saying that Wishing Well has been in and out of decks. It has not been. It was not in decks.
And then it became index.
It became the best of the options at that cost.
It wasn't being played, now it's being played. I've seen some people cut it for other reasons, but yes, it is in.
Generally,
now it is in. It is here. It is here, and it is seeing play. It's good. Alright, Freyalise. 4 loyalty planeswalker, 3 CMC, legendary planeswalker, Freyalise. Freyalise is dead, but she's here still. +1, untap. Yeah, in the story she's dead.
Huh.
+1, up. Like, this is just like flashback. +1, untap up to 1 target elf. That elf and a random elf card and a random elf creature card in your hand perpetually gain +1/+1. -1, seek an elf. -6, conjure a Regal Force card onto the battlefield. Regal Force is I had this prepared.
I believe it's 4 green for a 5/5 that
draws
you a card on each creature you can draw one of these.
Yep, there it is. Got there. Perfect. Okay. So it's an elves card. Cool. I think that's all that really needs to be said.
Yeah, there's not a huge amount to say about it.
Untapped elves gets elves big.
You seem really excited for this next card, Long Tusk Stalker?
Cat! It's a cat! Long Tusk Stalker.
Because
Green.
it's a cat.
1/1.
Why?
When it enters the battlefield or attacks, you get an energy. Pay 2 energy. Long Tusk Stalker perpetually gets +1/+0. You may then choose a creature card in your hand. If you do, that card perpetually gets +1/+0. This card, first off, it's a cat. Second off, it is a green 1-drop that is a 2/1 that attacks as a 2/1 because it gets the second energy on attacks and you can pay it right then, so it's a 2/1. And then it also says, hey, guess what? That card in your hand that you're going to play this turn, it is now +1/+0. That's ridiculous.
In a technical sense, that's kind of a 3-1 for 1.
Pretty much, it is it's 3 power on a 1-drop, and then if this gets to attack once or twice more times, guess what? It gets to grow again. Or if you have something that cares about counters, let's say you're playing a Winding Constrictor, guess what? That cares about energy.
It seems fine.
I'm glad we've gone back to the point of Jungle Lion being king again.
This card isn't this card is ridiculous, but it's a 1-mana 2/1 in green, and it has the ability to let cards clear thresholds, which can be very important. Turns out, if you make your Bone Crusher a giant of 5/3, that's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
If you make your Questing Beast a 5/4, that's pretty good. If you make your On-Crop Crasher a 4/2, that's pretty good. That's it.
No, that's not it. You have to pay the tax again.
Do I?
No.
Yes.
It's been one.
Yeah.
It's consistently been one per episode.
We've satiated
Has
the
it?
Questing Beast.
We've
Okay.
satiated the beast. We're moving on.
It's just
You've
the
been
first
a
person
card-
to do it.
Speaking
Okay.
of
How we've done it
cards,
before.
that can get you a Questing Beast, Pool of Vigorous Growth. Seismic, tell us about this card.
So Pool of Vigorous Growth is 1 and a green for an artifact that you pay X, tap, discard a card to create a token that's a copy of a random creature card with mana value X, and you activate it only as a sorcery. It's Momir, but on an artifact. The reason I'm interested in this card isn't just because it's Momir and I love Momir, and that's kind of the format that got me into playing Magic in a digital space. It's also and this feels weird to say, a card that's good with Channel. So here, Channel has not been a great card in this format.
You're gonna need to take me on this walk.
Yeah, okay. So Channel hasn't been great in this format. It almost got banned before it even existed in the format because of its history in other formats being, banned or restricted in pretty much every format that it's been in. In fact, every format that it's been in that at least Scryfall recognizes. Pool of Vigorous Growth then allows you to do what we said you shouldn't do before, which was we said don't play Ulamog for Channel's sake, because Ulamog is a bad card, and if you have it and not Channel, you're going to lose more games.
Okay, Ulamog is not a bad card. Ulamog is 10 mana and stuck in most hands.
Yes.
Let's be fair here, because Ulamog is a good card, but a hard to cast card if you're playing his only Channel. Just like
Pool of Vigorous Growth solves the primary issue of that situation, and also some ancillary ones. So the biggest issue is that Ulamog is not a card that you want to be playing in the decks that you were really playing Channel in, which is like green mid-range, or green kinda stompy but closer to mid-range than aggro. And Ulamog doesn't really fit because it's just so expensive in those decks. And Pool of Vigorous Growth is a card that isn't dead if you don't have 10 mana, but is also good at 10 mana. And the other biggest issue with Channel into Ulamog is that it had the issue of, if your opponent, had a typical mono red turn, or mono green potentially turns, they could get you down to either close to 10, below 10, or at 10 pretty quickly. And if that happened, and you're a turn behind on getting a Channel out into Ulamog, then you can't do that anymore. And most of the time, if you had a channel, you were probably putting yourself at, lightning bolt kills me range. Pull of Vigorous Growth doesn't have that problem because you get to choose where you're going. And so, if you're at 8 life and you have Pool of Vigorous Growth out, you draw Channel. Channel's not a dead card, but you also don't need to, pay a ton of life in order to survive or in order to get a big play out. You get to choose, if you don't have the life to pay, you can choose a lower number, and it makes Channel a lot more reasonable while also being like a big payoff for Channel. And I like that this card kind of solves that issue, and that it might give a chance to make Channel shine in a new, interesting way.
Then, last little note on this card, just to very quickly... Speaking of possible hits, we don't know if this is going to have the actual Momir on Arena pool, which had cards that, you can't collect. But assuming that it is using the collectible Arena pool in the 10 mana slot, which is the one that a lot of people are going to focus on because of Ulamog, you can hit Ulamog, or you could hit Imperious Great Worm, or you could hit Jin-Gitaxias.
I believe we actually do know that it does use the Arena Momir pool. I just don't know what's in that pool.
Spicy.
Well, they've added a bunch of weird things. Like there's
there's
a Gristlebrand in that list.
Yep.
I'm pretty
There's
sure.
Gristlebrand. There's all of the Bringers are in that list.
Let's move on before we get too deep on that.
Well, I'm saying if we're
Yeah.
using the Arena Momir pool, it's much worse.
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of the things
And-
that are added in that pool are worse than the average card at that mana cost.
Yeah.
Just because for a little while, Arena Momir had 1/9 drop that was game ending.
And in fact, yes, Phage the untouchable, or Phage the must castable, is in the pool, meaning you can die that way.
Speaking of paying a lot of mana to get eternally deep on things, our next card.
Timeless Witness. 2 and 2 green for a 2/1 human shaman. When Timeless Witness enters the battlefield, return target card from your graveyard to your hand. Also, has Eternalize. For 5 and 2 green, you can exile this card from your graveyard and create a token that's a copy of it. It's a 4/4 black zombie human shaman with no mana cost. Only as a sorcery. It's an Eternal Witness effect. And
It's
notably,
the first one.
it's the first one. And it's the first good card that loops with Ephemerate.
Timeless Witness, get Ephemerate. Ephemerate, my Timeless Witness, get Time Warp. Cast Time Warp.
Yep.
Yep. Just that. Just
Timeless
do that.
Witness returns 1 extra card to your hand per Ephemerate turn.
Yep.
Like, Timeless Witness is a card that when it was previewed in Modern Horizons 2, I said, this would be a kind of insane card to see on Arena, but I want it in Gladiator so bad because what I wanted was really just an Eternal Witness effect of any kind, and I would have taken a bad one, but instead we got a really good one. Yeah, I would have taken the 6 mana one we got in Battle for Zendikar.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I would have taken that one.
But they just gave us this one, and this one's also really good in fair decks. Guess what? If you aren't casting Ephemerate with this, still good. Like, you need to be doing some pretty good stuff with this card. Obviously, like you like to be playing this card, you need to be doing some good stuff with this. To be clear, but this being able to eternalize back is huge. This being able to just be like a value card is huge. Good.
Oh, it eternalizes back. It it returns cards. It's a creature. Like, it slices.
It gave us this one so it gets in the cow tech.
And it's such a good 2-power creature. And
yeah,
it's not the only surprisingly good 2-power creature that we're talking about today. And the next one is Veteran Charger, which is 2 and a green for a Centaur Soldier. It's a 2/2, and when it enters the battlefield, choose a creature card in your hand. That card gets perpetually +2/+2.
Yeah.
Now, Joker Boney talked about how this was potentially the worst in the cycle. I'm not quite sure. And
numbers wise, it's still 3 mana for 4/4 stat, which is above
exactly. Like,
yeah,
a 3 mana 4/4 is pretty good. And at the very least, this is a really good budget option to say, you know, hey, here, this is my 3 mana 4/4. On turn 4, whatever I play down is going to be huge. Imagine playing a 7/6 Shifting Ceratops.
Oh, for sure. There's definitely some very, like, you can craft some very powerful scenarios with this card. It's just, it's hard for this to make a slot with how impactful 3-drops in green are. And 3-drops in, like, in what you're going to, like, usually if you're going to be playing this, if you're playing a 2 and a green card, it's usually because you're playing another color as well.
Yeah, and
I
think this, if I'm going to be playing this, it's because it is 2 and a green and effectively offers 4 power in stats. I don't think it's like, it's not good enough for mono green, because in mono green we can be playing, you know, green cards, which are all 4 power and insane.
Yeah. So it just, I would be interested to see this card see play, but you need to be doing something very, like, explicitly busted with the +2/+2 for it to matter. We talked about damage thresholds earlier. Like, if there's a time where you're playing this and you're making sure that your next play that's an X3 gets to be an X5 instead, you know, like, there's a chance that makes this card good enough. But right now, I don't see the utility other than being possibly a very good common, in the sense that just, like, it gets to slide in.
So, I think the reason that this might be the least hypeable of these cards is that most of the others that we've seen, giving random creatures a random extra keyword oftentimes breaks Magic. Like, not literally breaks it apart, but can make things that are much better than you expect and give, you know, a lot better returns than, you know, you would see in a limited format. Like, having, you know, lifelink on a 2/2 doesn't add 1 mana to its value, you know. But
man, this synergism is lasting a while.
Yeah. So, but the thing is that increasing power and toughness rarely, if ever, really breaks apart the game of Magic. And I think Veteran Charger, if it's going to flounder, it's because creatures are already big, and making them bigger isn't super helpful.
But there is a way that we can make them bigger that is good, like this next card.
Yeah. Arcus Acolyte is green and a white for a 2/2 human cleric archer with reach, lifelink, and outlast for a green or a white. So you can pay either a green or a white, tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on it, and you can outlast only as a sorcery. And then each other creature you control without a +1/+1 counter on it has outlast for also green or a white. I think this card is just a really generically good card. It already has good stats. Reach and lifelink are both pretty relevant keywords, especially reach, because looking at this art, I don't really see your reach, which is a good thing because it means people will attack into it with flying creatures and not realize that it has reach, which I enjoy. I also think that Outlast is a better mechanic than a lot of people will think at first glance, especially in board states where you're going to be gaining a lot of life or are going to be playing a lot of creatures that can outlast. Because the reason Outlast is thought of as bad is because it disallows your creatures from being able to block. And Arcus Acolyte...
Attack.
Yeah, and it also stops them from attacking. But Arcus Acolyte kind of fixes that by having both a really good initial body, as well as making sure that it applies to all of your creatures, so you can just say, okay, I'm going to spend the mana that I wasn't going to spend at this point anyway, to make this creature bigger because it wasn't going to be going into combat if I had anything to say about it. And it allows you to kind of, prevent creatures from going into combat for a turn so that they can go into combat when they're more ready. And especially on lifelink and such, that pays a lot of really good returns.
Yeah, for
also
sure.
notably, Arcus Acolyte can come in, and your creatures that aren't summoning sick can then immediately outlast.
Yeah. So this is actually, just a really good late game play when you're kind of stalling out, just to see, okay, I pay 6 mana to play this Arcus Acolyte and then pump 4 of my creatures up for next turn.
Yeah, for sure. Also very powerful with with vigilant creatures because they get to attack and then do it, which can be pretty
not
powerful.
in combat, notably.
Yeah, not in combat.
Not in combat. You don't be like, haha, pump during combat. But honestly,
I'm most excited about this on turn 3 after I play an Incubation Druid on turn 2.
Oh, spicy. Outlast my Incubation Druid. Next turn, untap, have 7 mana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Though, if we're talking Incubation Druid nuts, we play a 1-drop and then Neoform it into an Incubation Druid and just...
Oh,
I
yeah.
need to play
Yeah.
more Neoform in this format, honestly. I haven't done it enough.
I've been.
There's a lot of ways
been.
to get a lot of mana off of Incubation Druid, and I just like having more.
Yeah. Speaking of cards that just do more, our next card. Is this me?
I think that's you.
This is you.
It is me. Haha! I threw to myself. Perfect. Priest of Fell Rites. White and a black for a 2/2. It's a human warlock. It's a priest, but it's a warlock. It's fine. Then it says, tap, pay 3 life. Sacrifice Priest of Fell Rites. Return target creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery. Then it also has Unearth for 3 white and a black. Return this card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste. Exile it at the beginning of the next end step. Or if it would leave the battlefield this turn. If it would leave the battlefield. Unearth only as a sorcery. Choo-choo!
Did you know that...
Reanimation.
Yeah, did you know that reanimating a thing for 2 mana is, good?
Yeah, it's good.
Bold
Pretty good.
take.
Instantly became the cheapest reanimation spell we had. The next cheapest before this was either Flashback Unburial Rites or activate and tap Doomed Necromancer.
Blood for Bones also works in that same way.
Blood for Bones, sure, yeah, also.
Yeah. We have a lot at 4 mana.
Yep.
But going straight from 4 mana to 2 mana is really a shakeup. Just being able to say...
I'd also note, this is only... The earliest this is going to happen is turn 3, just due to the fact that summoning sickness exists. But that's still good.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
That's still faster than our reanimation right now, yeah.
Yeah, it gives you a chance to cast a Ransack the Labs on this turn to be like, oh, cool, discard, and my top 3 was an Ulamog? Cool. But yeah, this is a cool reanimation card, but also, just importantly, like, as it just got mentioned in the chat, this is a great, amazing mid-range card, just being a redundant card. This card also a human, which we didn't mention with Arcus Acolyte either, but this card being a human is something that's very important to keep an eye on. Like, we don't have the tools for it to be ridiculous as a human, but just being a redundant card that lets you get back some of your more synergy-based cards in a more synergy-based deck is amazing. And then just, like, guess what? This gets outclassed eventually. It's a 2/2. Turn it into, I don't know, if you're playing Abzan midrange, turn it into an Elder Gargaroth. If you're playing just black-white, turn it into, what the from Kaldheim, the 4/3 flying lifelink hexproof from Planeswalkers.
Eradicator Valkyrie?
Yeah, turn it into an Eradicator Valkyrie. We talked about goblins with the goblins card, Mink. I specifically mentioned goblins at that time.
I think
You see,
also,
unfortunately, Mink was not here to see it.
yeah, the fact that we have the fact that it has Unearth also makes me just kind of think that, like, this works as kind of an inverse costed Unburial Rites. It's like they were theming it after something. And it's so good at doing that it does it in the correct order, which is the cheaper thing first, and then by the time you have more things in the graveyard as well, it just is so insane. This card also is you can't discard this card. You can't make someone discard this card. You can, but you shouldn't. It doesn't really matter too much if you counter it, because one of the reanimations is going to happen. Like,
no matter what, yeah.
This is such an insane reanimation spell, and it is a very big shocker that we're getting, a 2-mana reanimation piece in Gladiator. And I think that's
can be looped off of Luris. Good thing to mention.
Oh no. Okay,
Yeah.
I hate this card now.
But it is worth saying, pay 3 life is a real cost on this card, but you can build your deck to take advantage of that, to mitigate that. So just and it's like, there are ways to get around it, but you do need to keep that in mind. You can't just be like, alright, cool, bring back something, unearth it, bring back something, cool, I'm down 6 life. Sometimes that just gets you killed.
Yeah. Yeah, this card is insane.
Speaking of insane cards that kill people.
You really wanted this one on here, Seismic?
Yeah, Arcbound Shikari is 1 red-white for a 0/0 artifact creature cat soldier with first strike, and when Arcbound Shikari enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each other artifact creature you control, and modular 2, meaning that it enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it, and when it dies, you put its +1/+1 counters on target artifact creature. So, this card is a cat, and I don't think Cats is really looking necessarily to jump into red, but
Cats is usually not Naya, no. But some people have tried Naya Cats, but this card is not a Cats card.
Oh yeah, no, don't play this in Cats. But if you are going to be playing it, you actually do have a few other Cats in that deck. And Modular is just a really good mechanic to see with artifacts. Like, we're getting a ton of different artifact cards. A bunch of them have Modular, which makes, your other artifact aggro cards a lot better because it works really well at making sure that, things dying isn't that problematic. And this is the card that makes me want to try, Boros BattleBots more so than a lot of other cards. It's a 3-mana, really big payoff for artifact creatures, and it makes your board pretty insane if you just pay 3 mana to get a Steel Overseer activation. Turns out
this card,
that's a good card.
This card is kind of like Athalia's Lieutenant for artifacts, so that's kind of interesting, which we are also getting, and just like the body isn't bad either, all things considered. Like, you don't want to be playing this on an empty board, but if you even only put a counter on one creature, you're happy. That's 3/3 worth of stats on a first striking bot, like through a first striking body, and then with how modular works, you get the counters to stick around as long as you have an artifact creature.
Yeah, and
So,
notably,
just-
if you're putting counters on anything else, it means those things will potentially stick around after the Shikari theoretically dies, so that you can boost those ones even more. Like, this card just kind of slices and dices in that kind of respect.
It gets into the red zone and lets your board get into the red zone.
Yeah.
Our next
A
card
card
is
that's-
not doing that.
Yeah.
Well, this is actually a suite of 3 cards, because we got 3 of this effect. Ornithopter of Paradise is 2 mana for an 0/2 Flying Thopter. That says tap, add 1 mana of any color. And we get 2 others that are 2 mana, tap, add 1 mana of any color, which you might not have really realized that they were that card. Mana Weft Sliver is coming. 1 in a green for a 1/1 sliver that says slivers you control have tapped, add 1 mana of any color. And Sanctum Weaver. 2 mana for a 0/2 enchantment creature that taps for any color equal to the number of enchantments you have.
All right,
So
UFO. I'm not doing this to call you out, but you were the one that was residently complaining about Seismic adding more cards, and then you throw on at the end 2 more cards along with this.
well, I was just going to talk about Ornithopter of Paradise if I didn't have the
Sure.
go ahead to add more cards, and then Seismic did
Sure,
the thing
sure.
first.
All right, sure.
Because Ornithopter of Paradise is the best of the options, but the other
Yeah.
2 are still getting into Paradorks, which is what this is for. Because part of the problem with Paradorks is that you want things that aren't green mana. Especially with a Serac now in the deck, having the ability to tap things for black is pretty important. So being able to replace all your green producing terrible elves in the deck with these great worse bodied but multicolored producing other things is quite good.
Out of
And
curiosity, talking specifically about Ornithopter of Paradise, this doesn't refer to the other 2, but for Ornithopter of Paradise, do you think we're going to be seeing this in non-green decks? Is there like a deck that you can think of that wants this over, say, like a Cold Steelheart or a Mind Stone or Guardian Idol?
I'm playing this in non-Dorks Paradox.
yeah,
Well, sure. This gets in. This
But
gets
that's
into
also the
Paradox,
same
but that's
argument, yeah.
Yeah. Like, I'm talking about, like, are we using this to, like, in Orzhov mid-range?
I would not be surprised if someone did.
Yeah, like,
I think I
Or-
don't want to if there isn't like an additional synergy around it.
right. Or
but
if you can care about the flying body for whatever reason, like you have some equipment in your list, maybe. Is
yeah,
that-
but there's a lot of options for that synergy.
yeah, of course.
Like,
Just,
I think if you're
you
going
need
to have,
care
like-
about it being a creature that you don't have to pay mana into making a creature.
yeah. So like white blue flyers,
Maybe.
if that deck ever
I don't know.
resurfaces from the hell dimension, I'd probably play this in that because, you know, we
Yep.
have flying wide pump effects and also, you know, ways to use excess mana and need to get to like 4 mana generally.
All right, I can see it. I was off it at first, but maybe.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a good card.
Yeah, this card is perfectly fine, and like maybe it slides into some list that's just like, oh, this is just like it's a mana dork that isn't in green. Cool, sick, I'm in.
Also, the fact that it does fly means
Yeah.
that it will come in and could be a blocker for like an Emerith for a turn longer than you and you get your Wrath down now, or what have you. Yeah.
Don't remind me of that card.
What good cards?
Imarith, got a flashback. It's fine. Everything is fine. It's also fine. The fact that we've ended the set review. We finished talking about all the cards that we planned about talking about, and we did it in pretty good time too.
Yeah, we do have a bit of time left. We got about 20 minutes or so. And there were some cards that were being brought up, and I think the first one that I want to talk about is Putrid Goblin. I am surprised that we left this off the list, because there is actually quite a bit to talk about.
It was one of my last cuts. Honestly,
Yeah.
I was going to talk about this card because I love talking about combo cards, but I saw that I was gonna edit my list, but then you mentioned you want to talk about Vesper Orc, so I was like, okay, we're talking about an creature combo, but to talk about Putrid Goblin, 1 in black creature, zombie goblin, 2/2, persist. Very simple card. Reads very simple. Does simple
It's like
thing.
7 cards on Arena right now that make it such that Putrid Goblin can be sacrificed infinitely.
Yeah. So that's the line with persist. If you can get this creature to enter the battlefield and get a +1/+1 counter, you just like if you have a sacrifice outlet that and you have a way to deal damage, you win. So this is just like a lot of people are talking about it as like a combo victory for goblins, just because we're getting like Judas
There's
is a
also
card
a
that
good
deck
one
has played before.
with Broodmoth, where you get to choose which counter it comes back with.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah. Oh.
yes. Ooh,
yeah.
yes.
So it comes back
Yeah.
with the with the flying counter, and then it comes back with the -1/-1 counter, and then but without the flying counter. So it just keeps going like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that ooh,
So
that gave me
Also,
chills. But yeah,
weird
this
also bit Endling technically can get Undying from this set, and that
yeah.
has some. It's not easily use, but has some use with Yawgmoth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sure there exists a combo that one could feasibly figure out, but Putrid Goblin is just so much easier for any of those concepts.
Future Goblin
my
just like
other thing
go
with
into
Putrid
the
Goblin
ether. Yeah.
is that it's not a good thing to talk about, but it will sate Mink a little bit. Mink a while back made a Sultai Goblins list that was entirely changelings and exclusively one black goblin, shambling goblin.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Now we have a few more cards, creature cards that can fit into that. And Putrid
Alright.
Goblin is
I'm
not the
gonna
worst
stop.
among them.
Gonna stop you right there. This is why
I guess.
this
You're
is why
not
we don't
technically wrong.
yeah, this is why we don't talk about Sultai Goblins.
No, but anyway,
Yeah.
just to like really go over the Putrid Goblin combo, there's a few different options. In Pure Goblins, you have Grumbling Generous, which is a 3-mana 3/3 that says your goblins come in with a +1/+1 counter effectively. So you sacrifice it infinitely. The 2 counters negate each other, and you can just do it a bunch. Goblins has a sacrifice outlet in the form of its 1-drop, which is
Skirk Prospector.
Skirk Prospector, which that's as much mana as you wish, and then you can use that for like a Banefire or cast other goblins. The other goblin sack outlet that has coming onto Arena in this set is Slinggang Lieutenant, which is 3 and a black for a 1/3 that comes with 2 goblins, and you can sacrifice a goblin to deal 1 damage to each opponent, and you gain a life.
Opponent lose a life, and you gain a life.
Yeah.
Make target opponent lose a life, or each opponent.
I think it's each.
Might be each. Doesn't target. Each.
It is target.
Target.
Absolutely
Damn.
target.
And it's not a 1/3; it's a 1/1. Damn.
Yeah.
Almost got
But-
there. Yeah.
Almost got
so,
there.
but point
But
being
that's
is that
the
it's
pure
a
goblin
drain.
combo
It's a drain,
pieces.
not a damage, which can be relevant sometimes.
Yep. And then past that, card coming in the set, Good Fortune Unicorn also does it. Vizier of Remedies also makes infinite sacking.
Yep.
If you really want to go deep, you could play Cathar's Crusade.
Cathar's Crusade also does it. Yep. We talked about Luminous
you could
Broodmoth, which I didn't
play-
think about. That also does it. Yeah.
Luminous Broodmoth. You could play a Soul Sister effect and also Heliod. That works. You can.
There's
Any other option?
You can do a lot of things with Putrid Goblin.
Yeah, Putrid
We just
Goblin is
needed
just a very,
persist creature.
very unassuming card. They just like, oh,
Yep.
neat. Yeah.
Unfortunately, Putrid Goblin is a little bit annoying because I would much prefer to have had Sky Shroud Elite.
I mean, I
What
would have
if you
rather
could've
had
asked?
Kitchen Finks, but that's just my
Well,
thing.
I know Kitchen Things is like the actually good card, but if we're talking about similar effect, Sky Shroud Elite. Yeah, I would
Sky
prefer.
Shroud Elite. Sky Shroud Elite. No, Butcher Ghoul doesn't work, but Butcher Ghoul's undying.
The other card I want to talk about that I saw in chat was Dragon Rage Channeler, which is
Yeah.
a single red for a
Ooh.
human shaman. It's a 1/1,
Hold on.
and whenever you cast
What?
a...
Yeah. We're waiting.
Non-
We're waiting.
We missed one.
What
We missed-
what
we
card
missed-
did we miss?
We have Metallic Mimic. That's a goblin
you're right.
card.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
And that one's
Metallic
even a
Mimic.
goblin.
Metallic
Yeah.
Mimic also like Grumgully works with Putrid Goblin. But yeah. So to talk about Dragon Rage,
Sorry.
Sean, as Seismic thankfully put in
Yeah.
chat.
It's a one for those not in the Twitch
Yeah.
stream.
Oh no, I was just talking about how you typed the card name. I hadn't
Yeah.
thought about that.
Dragon DRC, or Darcy as folks have been calling it, has whenever you cast a non-creature spell, Surveil 1, and then Delirium, as long as there are 4 or more card types among cards in your graveyard, DRC gets +2/+2, has flying, and attacks each combat if able. So this is the one card that I'm not sure how good we are at getting Delirium, and I'm interested in what you all think about this card because I have no thoughts at all about this card.
So here's my thought, and here's also why I didn't bring it up as one of the cards for the set review. Just as a card, it is a very focused card. If you're playing something like Grixis or Mardu Pyromancer, or like there's like a Grixis spells list, Grixis mid-rangey spells, I think that turning on Delirium is just like you cast 2 cantrips and then you're there most of the time. With the Surveil on this card, with a lot of the cantrips we have being able to put cards in the graveyard, with cards like Fabled Passage, with the like people are playing like the deserts, or well they're not deserts, but the cycling duels, the bicycles, whatever. Like we have the cards to make, if we want Delirium to be possible, like you need to be playing a deck that wants to make Delirium possible to have it happen. But if you are even thinking about making it happen, it is very doable as long as you're likely playing blue or you have a lot of the black cantrips.
Hard disagree. I am of the opinion that Dragon Rage Chandler is the best red 1-drop we are getting in Gladiator no matter which deck you're playing.
Okay.
1-drop creature as a clarification, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
1-drop creature.
Yeah,
Yes.
I don't
Alright.
think it beats
Bolt is still better.
No. Bolt is still
Alright.
better, but it's 1-drop creature. Because you're talking about ways to get lands into your graveyard through doing it with, like, I don't know, cycling them or not. Like, people get really focused on the idea that we don't have fetch lands, so we can't get lands in the graveyard.
No,
Dragon
sorry.
Rage... Shh. Let me finish.
Alright.
Dragon's Rage Channeler has a built-in ability to put cards from the top of your library into your graveyard. And if you're building a deck without absolutely hamstringing yourself, you're going to have lands in it. It's
Yeah.
not hard to get lands into the graveyard. And
No,
then
for sure. I agree.
Delirium, land, creature, instant sorcery, all things you play in any deck with red.
Yeah.
No, like my take on this card is that I love it and it slaps, and it's not going to be like as dominating as I believe it has gotten in like Modern and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
pay
for
attention to those formats, but I've heard it's quite good, and I'm not surprised because I love this card, really.
You
Yeah.
see, what I
It,
appreciate
it
about
does
Dragon's Rage
everything I
Channeler
want it to do.
is that it's finally gotten people, even in Legacy, to realize that no, your deck is not good because that's a terrible card that they play. Delver Secrets is good. It's good because you play good cards around it, and that's just a card you choose to win the game with. Now they have an actually good card to use.
Yeah. Modern Legacy getting to like actually have a turn 1/3/3 is pretty good. Yeah. It has happened. Mishra's Bauble is a very good card.
Mhm.
In this format, I want to be very clear when I agree that it can be played in mono red. I'm just saying that when we're talking like people yes, Surveil can very easily get a land into the graveyard. Agreed. 100% agreed. I'm just talking about like if we're going to expand this out into other red decks, people are going to look at this card as like, I can cut it. But like there are just because you can sometimes turn on this card like just by playing Magic, there are reasons to build around cards like this. There are reasons to build your deck to, and that's sort of more what I was focusing on. Because like, yeah, it do thing. Card do thing with card.
So that's all the cards that I wanted to that I will really wanted to talk about that I saw in the chat. And I think we're good to go to the ending part of this stream.
Yeah, we're gonna go on to our favorite part, the ending segment, the closing part of the show, our good timely tradition, the craft corner, where we craft object, maybe a card, seismic. I think
Probably
that
not
you
a corner,
can
though.
craft card in the corner.
Does
Does card have 4 corners? Does this card that you want to tell us about have 4 corners?
Go sit in the corner and think about your crafts.
So the card I have for you all today is a card that I have realized the great power of from playing it in 5-color Niv range, which is a 5-color mid-range deck that focuses on cool synergies with Niv Mizzet Reborn. Meaning most of the good cards in there are 2 colors. The card I have for you today is Comball, Console of Allocation. And this card is insane. And I don't think a lot of people really notice that it's so good. So it doesn't have the greatest body, and it doesn't have any, really eye-catching keywords. So people glance over it, and, it's also a rare in a historic-only set, so a lot of people didn't get too many opportunities to draft it. But, wow, this card is a truck, and when you're playing a lot of other threats around it, it means that your opponent is constantly trying to survive and has a much harder time doing so than normal. Have you ever seen a control player who's at around 5 think about wrathing the board with 5 creatures for about a solid minute and a half? I have. It's great.
Yeah, seems like it's pretty good. And then you just get to follow that up with Lightning Helix, and it's like, guess what? You die!
Yeah. Comball also means that, every opponent has non-creature spells in their deck. They might not cast too many of them, but they certainly have some of them in there. And most of the time, Comball will eat at least 1 activation, because guess how easiest to kill a Comball?
Lightning Bolt?
It's with non-creature spells.
Well,
And dang, that feels good.
Heartless Act, Lightning Helix,
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just, this card just like, come on, hit me, I dare you. And then it's like, a four life swing is huge. It can seem like not a lot. 2 can seem like not a lot, but when you realize it's lose 2 and gain 2, that's 4 in your advantage. Like, just It can very easily take over a game. If it gets to eat one activation, you're just like, great. If it gets to eat two activations, you're just you're living. You're there to party, whether it's because you had a protection spell or anything like that. And that's the biggest part with this too. Like if you're playing this in a deck like white black D&T or just like white black midrange, you're usually playing cards like Fight as One or what's the card? God's Willing. Like you'll play cards like that sometimes, and just being able to let this dodge one removal spell means that they have to try and use another removal spell on it, and they lose more life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think my favorite part about this is that especially in mid-range, everything you play is a haymaker. And so when your opponent sees a 2/3 for 3, usually for them that's a sigh of relief. Like that's, I get to not die immediately. But it does create this kind of fun game where you have better threats to kill. But you have to kill Campbell first, or you die.
Yeah, the Comball soup the Comball soup kitchen invites all competitors.
And I think that is where we'll leave it for today when it comes to podcast content. But reminder to everyone who is live on this special live Twitch episode and those who will be listening back afterwards, if you made it this far, you're probably a big enough fan that I should remind you that we actually have a sub button on our Twitch channel now. You can go in and support whatever it is that we're doing here. And don't forget that if you do have Twitch Prime, you do get a free sub. And I'm not saying use it here, just use it somewhere.
Yeah,
I mean, if you end up using it here, even
Blight
better.
has dropped out of this call like a couple of times. We could. The tech is very very shoestrings and tape right now.
I'm not completely just choosing to be silent here. Technical difficulties exist.
Yeah, but even
honestly, just the more you guys support us, whether by subscribing here or subscribing on our Patreon,
or just following the channels. Honestly,
watching the ads helps us a lot. Also, if you do subscribe, this is getting set up right now. If you do subscribe and you are on, or if you are on the Discord, guess what? You get a plarg. You get the plarg emote. You get to use it wherever you want. And if you're on Discord, guess what? You get to use it on other Discord servers once we get it set up. It's being set up. Yeah, there's a bunch of ways that you can support us, whether through Patreon or through Twitch or just watching our content.
Yeah.
And if you want to find us other places, make sure to join the Discord. Make sure to watch our VODs on YouTube. Make sure to, just like keep up with the content. Watch us where great podcasts are found. And, with that, it's been me, Joker Boney.
It's been me, UFO.
I continue to be Seismic Lawns.
And this has been Blight this whole time, minus the parts where I wasn't here.
And I've been Effie. I'll be in touch about your car's extended warranty. Have a good one, everyone.